Chapter 567. Xiao Chen's sudden appearance stunned everyone, but the disciples of the Tianfeng mansion were overjoyed. Then, they all called out, "Senior Xiao Chen." Xiao Chen was already recognized as the #1 person in this selection. His appearance boosted the confidence of the disciples of the Tianfeng mansion. The top 3 disciples of the White Mist sect had lost, but Xiao Chen would definitely not lose. This was what everyone believed in. Back then, when Xiao Chen fought 1 against 2, he still managed to cut down both Yu Bai and Lu Li with his sword. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, Xiao Chen looked calmly at the purple-robed young man in front of him. However, before Xiao Chen could speak, a happy and excited voice came from the Tianyue mansion disciples. "Senior Xiao Chen." His voice was filled with excitement. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen looked at the crowd from the Tianyue mansion in astonishment. Soon, an elegant-looking young man in a gray robe strode out from the crowd. When Xiao Chen saw this person, a smile involuntarily appeared on his face. Gu Mu. The person who strode out from the crowd was the divine music king of the heavenly Chen continent, Gu Mu. Xiao Chen didn't expect to meet him here. Without any explanation, Gu Mu strode to Xiao Chen and said excitedly, ignoring the tense atmosphere. "Senior Xiao Chen, I didn't expect to see you here." "Yeah, I didn't expect you to have already joined the Tianyue sacred sect." "Not bad, not bad. You've improved a lot." Hearing this, Xiao Chen replied with a smile. Gu Mu's cultivation had reached the initial level of the Dao validation realm. At the same time, he had joined the Tianyue sacred sect. His aura was much stronger than when he was in the heavenly Chern continent. Although Xiao Chen hadn't fought with Gu Mu, he was sure that Gu Mu's strength wasn't as simple as it seemed. The two of them chatted happily. At the same time, more than a dozen young warriors from the heavenly Chen continent walked out from the Tianfeng mansion's side. Similarly, Mu Feng and the others from the Tianfeng mansion came to Xiao Chen's side. A group of warriors from the heavenly Chern continent gathered together. It was obvious that they knew each other. Facing this sudden change, the people from the Tianfeng mansion and the Tianyue mansion were confused. What was going on? They all know each other? Naturally, no one knew that Xiao Chen and the others had come from the heavenly Chen continent. They told each other about their experiences over the years. It had to be said that after coming to the heavenly river continent, everyone had made great progress. However, in comparison, there were also some people who had fallen in the unfamiliar heavenly river continent. Although it was painful, there was nothing they could do about it. Seeing everyone happily chatting together, the purple-robed young man finally couldn't hold it in any longer. He said in a cold voice, "What's going on with you guys? Don't forget your identity. You are now all disciples of the Tianyue sacred sect." Obviously, the purple-robed young man was dissatisfied with Gu Mu and the others chatting so happily with Xiao Chen. Hearing his words, Gu Mu, who had been talking to Xiao Chen, turned his head and looked at the purple-robed young man coldly. "Zhang Mingfeng, the Tianyue sacred sect and the Tianfeng Shengzong are not mortal enemies, right? Moreover, the sacred master brought us here only to exchange pointers with the disciples of the Tianfeng Shengzong. We are old acquaintances and haven't seen each other for a long time. What's wrong with talking? Or do we have to get your permission to talk?" The purple-robed young man's name was Zhang Mingfeng. He was the person with the best result in the Tianyue sacred sect's selection this time. He was already internally decided to become a core disciple of the Tianyue sacred sect. However, facing him, Gu Mu didn't give him any face at all. Of course, in the Tianyue sacred sect's selection this time, Gu Mu was ranked second. Moreover, the difference between his result and Zhang Mingfeng's was very small. Similarly, he was already internally decided to become a core disciple of the Tianyue sacred sect. Therefore, facing Zhang Mingfeng, Gu Mu naturally didn't need to give him any face. Seeing that Gu Mu didn't put him in his eyes at all, Zhang Mingfeng's face darkened. He immediately yelled angrily, "Gu Mu, don't be too arrogant. Do you really think that I, Zhang Mingfeng, am afraid of you? What? Do you want to fight? Or do you want to fight with Senior Xiao Chen? Don't blame me for not reminding you. Senior Xiao Chen's strength is stronger than mine. I can't do anything to you, but don't think that Senior Xiao Chen can't do anything to you. Facing Zhang Mingfeng's angry yell, Gu Mu coldly laughed. He and Zhang Mingfeng were originally not on good terms. However, their strengths were similar. Although they had fought a few times, there were no results in the end. Therefore, in the end, Zhang Mingfeng understood that he couldn't do anything to Gu Mu. Therefore, he could only helplessly choose to ignore him. As Gu Mu's voice faded, everyone lost their interest after Zhang Mingfeng's words. Moreover, now wasn't the place to talk. Walking out from the crowd, Xiao Chen arrived in front of Zhang Mingfeng and spoke with a calm expression. The Tianyue sacred sect and Tianfeng Xingzong's spar was originally understandable. However, since you've already won, why do you have to take his life? That's a bit too much. Xiao Chen did not think much of it when Zhang Mingfeng defeated the disciple of the Whiterhaze sect. It was not a big deal if one was weaker than the other in a sparring match. However, Zhang Mingfeng clearly wanted to take the other person's life just now, which was something that should not have happened. Although Xiao Chen didn't understand the relationship between the Tianyue sacred sect and Tianfeng Xingzong, it wasn't hard to guess from the Tianyue saint and Tianfeng saint's conversation that although there was a strong smell of gunpowder between the two, there wasn't the slightest bit of enmity. Moreover, the two sacred sects would occasionally have conflicts, but it wasn't a big deal. This was a very normal competitive relationship that didn't affect the big picture. It was also because of this that the Tianyue saint dared to tear open the space of the darkness prison's secret realm without any restraint and send Zhang Mingfeng and the others in. Otherwise, if the two sects had enmity, the Tianyue saint's actions would undoubtedly cause a war between the two sections. Zhang Mingfeng's face was calm and no joy could be seen. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhang Mingfeng coldly laughed and said without any concern, "It's a disgrace for a dog to live in this world. What's wrong with me sending him on his way?" He didn't feel that he had done anything wrong at all. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled indifferently and said slowly, "Is that so? Is this your reason? Then let me be your opponent. Just as well, I want to send you on your way." Xiao Chen took the initiative to ask for a fight. Seeing this, the surrounding people from the Tianqian continent took the initiative to disperse, leaving space for Xiao Chen. At the same time, the disciples from the Tianfeng mansion burst into a slightly chaotic roar. "Senior brother Xiao Chen, kill him. Let him know that the Tianfeng mansion is not to be trifled with." "That's right. Senior brother Xiao Chen, kill him. The sacred master has already said that this is the darkness prison's secret realm. There's no need to worry about killing him." Zhang Mingfeng's attitude had indeed infuriated the disciples of the Skywind Mansion. Especially when he had tried to kill Zhang Mingfeng's disciple just now, it had completely infuriated the disciples of the Skywind Mansion. Now that Xiao Chen had taken the initiative to challenge them, the disciples of the Skywind Mansion were naturally very excited. Chapter 568. The disciples of the Tianfeng Mansion were clamoring for Xiao Chen to teach Zhang Mingfeng a lesson. Although the disciples of the Tianyue Mansion were much smaller in number, they did not back down and shouted angrily when they heard the clamor of the crowd. "A bunch of ants! You're worse than a dog in front of Senior Brother Zhang. How dare you talk nonsense here? Senior Brother Zhang, kill this guy and let these guys from the Tianfeng Mansion continue to be arrogant." Both sides had already started cursing at each other before the fight had even begun. While everyone was cursing at each other, Tianfeng Saint and Tianyue Saint were sitting opposite each other outside a thatched cottage by a beautiful lake in the back of Tianfeng Xingzong Mountain. A light mirror was floating in the air in front of them. The scene in the mirror was the dark prison's secret realm. Tianyue Saint laughed heartily as he watched the scene in the mirror while drinking his wine. "Haha, these little guys are really merciless. It's as if they have a death grudge with each other. The disciples from both sides cursed angrily as if they would not stop until one of them was dead. However, Tianyu Saint did not seem to care. On the contrary, he laughed happily. Tianfeng Saint rolled his eyes when he heard Tianyu Saint's laughter. He said snappily, "Tianyu, I realize that you really can't stay still. Aren't you afraid that these guys will not stop until one of them is dead? Let's see what you can do when all of them die in the dark prison secret realm." Tianfeng Saint knew Tianyu Saint's character too well. He had been like this since the beginning. Even after becoming a saint, he still did things his own way and was eager to stir up trouble. "Haha, senior brother, didn't you cooperate with me just now? If you didn't say that before you left, would those guys from the Tianfeng mansion be so arrogant?" Tianyu Saint laughed nonchalantly in the face of Tianfeng Saint's reprimand. However, Tianyu Saint actually addressed Tianfeng Saint as senior brother. If other people were present, they would probably be so shocked that their teeth would fall out. One of them was the master of the Tianfeng mansion, while the other was the master of the Tianyu mansion. How could they be senior brothers? The world didn't know the relationship between Saint Tianfeng and Saint Tianyu. However, the two of them were indeed martial brothers. What surprised everyone was that the relationship between Saint Tianfeng and Saint Tianyu was very good. In the eyes of outsiders, Tianfeng Xingzong and Tianyu sacred sect were competitors. Since the establishment of the two sacred sects, they had almost never stopped fighting. Between disciples and disciples, between deacons and elders, between elders, no matter which level, it could be said that they were all in a fight. The leaders of these two sects were actually fellow disciples. If this were to be spread out, perhaps not many people would believe it. Of course, no one had ever seriously thought about it. Although the two giants, Tianfeng Xingzong and Tianyu sacred sect, had been fighting for countless years, there had never been a real war. Everything was just a small-scale fight, and the casualties were not serious. Everything was under control. Just think about it. Two sects that had been fighting for so many years were able to maintain a peaceful relationship. This was a very strange thing. Of course, this was all thanks to Saint Tianfeng and Saint Tianyu. The two of them were senior brothers, and they had established their own forces in Tianfeng Mansion and Tianyu Mansion respectively. It was very clear that if a force wanted to grow and progress, it naturally needed competition. Therefore, the two neighboring sacred sects had undoubtedly become competitors. However, there were two saint masters secretly controlling the situation, so everything was under control and would not affect the overall situation. The relationship between Tianfeng Saint and Tianyu Saint could be said to be a secret. After hearing Tianyu Saint's words, Tianfeng Saint rolled his eyes and did not speak anymore. Seeing this, Tianyu Saint took a sip of his wine and then looked at Xiao Chen in the light mirror. Then, he looked at Zhang Mingfeng, who was standing opposite of Xiao Chen, and said with a smile, "Senior brother, this Zhang Mingfeng is very good. He's a piece of unpolished jade. This time, he was the first in the selection of our Tianyu sacred sect. Moreover, his strength has reached the level of a prospective pro-disciple. In my opinion, in less than 3 years, this lad will certainly be ranked as one of the top 10 pro-disciples of our Tianyu sacred sect. I'm afraid that your disciple is not Zhang Mingfeng's opponent." Tianyu Saint was praising himself. However, he had to admit that Zhang Mingfeng's strength was indeed very strong. He had indeed reached the level of a prospective pro-disciple. He had already surpassed the level of a king of geniuses. Hearing Tianyu Saint's words, Tianfeng Saint smiled and took a sip of his wine. Then, he looked at Xiao Chen in the light mirror and said indifferently, "I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. Xiao Chen's strength has already entered the ranks of a pro-disciple. Therefore, although Zhang Mingfeng has the strength of a prospective pro-disciple, I'm afraid that he is still not Xiao Chen's opponent. Therefore, you'd better think carefully about what to do if Zhang Mingfeng is killed by Xiao Chen." Tianfeng Saint actually recognized Xiao Qun. However, after thinking about it carefully, this was not surprising. After all, as a saint, it was impossible to hide the matter of Tianfeng Xingzong from him. Furthermore, Tianfeng Saint had secretly paid attention to the selection of Tianyue sacred sect, especially Xiao Qun. He was not worried about Xiao Qun at all. Hearing this, Tianyue Saint looked at Xiao Qun suspiciously. This lad has the strength of a pro-disciple? That's impossible, right? However, there's no need for senior brother to lie to me. He smiled embarrassedly. If Zhang Mingfeng is in danger later, I'll naturally step in to save him. At that time, senior brother, please don't be angry. Why would I be angry? Someone is sending himself to be slapped. I'm more than happy. Tianfeng Saint laughed. The two saints were personally watching the competition. At the same time, under the curses of the disciples from both sides, the battle between Xiao Qun and Zhang Mingfeng finally broke out. Zhang Mingfeng was the one who made the first move. He took a step forward, and his whole body instantly turned into countless afterimages. It was impossible to tell which one was his real body. At the same time, the afterimages all over the sky threw punches at Xiao Qun at the same time. Arrogant ant, go to hell. Obviously, Zhang Mingfeng was really angry. He did not hold back at all when he attacked. Obviously, he wanted to take down Xiao Qun directly and show the people of Tianfeng Mansion that they were a bunch of ants, a bunch of dogs. At a glance, Xiao Qun could tell that Zhang Mingfeng was using an upper-grade heaven-level movement technique. However, he did not panic at all. Instead, he sneered and shouted, "Upper-grade heaven-level movement technique? Ferocious tiger rush." Zhang Mingfeng was not the only one who knew an upper-grade heaven-level movement technique. Xiao Qun also knew it. As Xiao Qun spoke, the shadow of a ferocious tiger quickly condensed behind Xiao Qun. Then, a tiger roar resounded through the sky. Chapter 569. As soon as the battle began, the two of them immediately used their heaven-level upper martial skills. Accompanied by a deafening tiger roar, Zhang Mingfeng's attack arrived as expected. It seemed that the sky was filled with shadows of fists, but there was only one true body of Zhang Mingfeng. He faced Xiao Qun on the left and threw a punch right away. With a muffled boom, the two fists collided and successfully blocked Zhang Mingfeng's attack. Both of them were extremely fast, and Zhang Mingfeng was not surprised that Xiao Qun was able to block his punch. After all, being able to appear here and being respectfully addressed as Senior Xiao Qun by the disciples of the Skywind Mansion was enough to prove Xiao Qun's strength. It would be strange if Xiao Qun could not even block this punch. You're slightly stronger than that ant from before, but you still can't change anything, Zhang Mingfeng coldly shouted as he faced Xiao Qun head-on. Hearing Zhang Mingfeng's words, Xiao Qun smiled faintly and said, "However, your strength has disappointed me. I was wondering how strong you were." Although Xiao Qun could not show any weakness in his words, he had to admit that Zhang Mingfeng was not weak. On the contrary, Zhang Mingfeng's strength was very strong, and had vaguely surpassed the level of a king of prides. After a head-on collision, the two storage rings on their hands flashed with light at the same time as they both summoned their heaven weapons. Xiao Qun held the black dragon sword in his hand, while Zhang Mingfeng held a white longsword. With the heaven weapons in hand, the aura from both of them was even more terrifying. At the same time, two extremely terrifying sword essences soared from both of them. Zhang Mingfeng was obviously a sword cultivator. Moreover, his understanding of the way of the sword could be said to be almost on par with Xiao Qun. Compared to Yu Bai and the others, he was obviously much stronger. Extremely fast and extremely powerful, the two of them engaged in an intense battle. For a moment, it was difficult to determine who was stronger. Looking at the two of them engaged in an intense battle, Gu Lingyao's eyes were filled with worry. Zhang Mingfeng's strength was indeed not an exaggeration. Judging from the current situation, it would not be easy for Xiao Qun to win. Gu Lingyao was naturally not worried about Xiao Chen losing face for the Skywind Mansion. Instead, he was worried about Xiao Chen's safety. Not only Gu Lingyao, but the disciples of the Skywind Mansion and the Skypeak Mansion were all worried as they watched the two of them engaged in an intense battle. After a fierce battle of hundreds of moves, the two of them were evenly matched. Neither of them had the upper hand. At this moment, Zhang Mingfeng suddenly shouted angrily, "I didn't expect the Skywind Mansion to have someone like you. Interesting. In that case, there is no need for me to hold back." Azure Moon Sword Body. Xiao Chen's strength shocked Zhang Mingfeng. At the same time, he understood that he would not be able to defeat Xiao Chen if he did not use his true strength. Therefore, without any hesitation, Zhang Mingfeng activated his Azure Moon Sword Body. Special Physique. Following Zhang Mingfeng's shout, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a strange light. Zhang Mingfeng really did have a special physique. Xiao Chen had already felt it during the battle. Facing Zhang Mingfeng, who had already displayed his Azure Moon Sword Body, Xiao Chen naturally would not hold back. Xiao Chen fully activated his Tempered Battle Body. A golden light suddenly appeared around Xiao Chen. Azure Moon Sword Body versus Tempered Battle Body. The only thing that made Xiao Chen a little depressed was that he was still unable to activate the Heavenly Sword Embryo. He did not know why, but ever since he had awakened the Soul Slash, the Heavenly Sword Embryo had not shown any signs of movement. Only the power of the Soul Slash was constantly increasing. Tempered Battle Body versus Azure Moon Sword Body. It could be said that both of them did not hold back in the slightest. At the same time, the battle between the two of them had completely entered a white-hot stage. It was not an exaggeration to say that the battle between Xiao Chen and Zhang Mingfeng could already be said to be the most elite battle in the younger generation of the Tianyue Mansion and Tianfeng Mansion. This was because with the strength of the two of them, the core disciples were clearly not their opponents. Only the direct disciples would be able to suppress the two of them. Looking at the intense battle between the two of them, no matter if it was the Tianfeng Mansion or the Tianyue Mansion, everyone was inwardly shocked. The strength of the two of them clearly surpassed them by too much. Is Senior Xiao Chen's strength already so terrifying? I originally thought that I had slowly caught up to him in this period of time. It seems that there is still a long way to go. Gu Mu softly muttered as he stared at the battle between the two of them without blinking. Ever since he came to the Tianhe continent, Gu Mu had never slacked off in his cultivation. He originally thought that with his improvement, he would gradually close the gap between him and Xiao Chen, the head of the King of Prides. However, it seemed that this was not the case. Not only did he not close the gap, but the gap between the two of them was also getting bigger. Although he felt a little helpless in his heart, he was more happy for Xiao Chen than anything else. In a short period of time, it was difficult to determine the winner of the battle. Following the intense battle, Xiao Chen and Zhang Mingfeng gradually entered a state of selflessness. In their eyes there was only the battle, only the other party. They had already turned a deaf ear to everything around them. Time passed by minute. Originally, there were only 3 days left until the Glory Sect selection. Although it seemed like a long time, these 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Looking at the intense battle between Xiao Chen and Zhang Mingfeng that had already lasted for 3 days, a Tianyue Mansion disciple muttered with a face full of shock. They've already fought for 3 days, right? There's still no winner and loser? They had already fought without rest for 3 days, but Xiao Chen and Zhang Mingfeng were still enjoying themselves. Neither of them showed any signs of stopping. However, following such a long and intense battle, Zhang Mingfeng and Xiao Chen's conditions were getting worse and worse. After all, they had used up too much energy. No one thought that the battle between the two would last for such a long time. However, a few powerful disciples like Gu Mu could already see that the winner and loser was about to be decided. It was already time for the winner and loser to be decided. As expected, in the intense battle, Xiao Chen caught hold of a flaw in Zhang Mingfeng's defense. He knocked Zhang Mingfeng's long sword away with a single slash. Immediately, he pointed out and used the Tai Yi sword finger. A thick sword ray instantly swallowed Zhang Mingfeng's body. It was just a small flaw, but it was enough to determine the result. Under extreme exhaustion, Zhang Mingfeng made a small mistake, and this mistake was precisely caught by Xiao Chen. Just like that, victory was secured. We won. Seeing the Tai Yi sword finger directly swallowing Zhang Mingfeng, Gu Lingyao, Mu Feng and the other Tianqi sect disciples were all extremely excited. After 3 days of intense battle, Zhang Mingfeng, who was already exhausted, was hit directly by the Tai Yi sword finger. Even if he didn't die, he would definitely be severely injured. After about 10 breaths, the Tai Yi sword finger slowly dissipated. Zhang Mingfeng's figure once again appeared before everyone's eyes. At this moment, the aura on Zhang Mingfeng's body was clearly extremely weak. There was also a trace of blood hanging from the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that the previous attack had indeed injured him quite badly. At the same time, the moment Zhang Mingfeng's figure appeared, Xiao Chen suddenly appeared in front of him. He placed the ink dragon sword across Zhang Mingfeng's neck and said indifferently, "You've lost." Chapter 570. The ink dragon sword was placed across Zhang Mingfeng's neck. Xiao Chen only needed to exert a little force, and Zhang Mingfeng's head would fall to the ground. Feeling the chill from the ink dragon sword, Zhang Mingfeng's face turned ugly. He could not believe that he had lost. In the Tianyue mansion, Zhang Mingfeng had defeated everyone who had participated in the Holy Sect's selection. Even Gu Mu could not defeat him, but Zhang Mingfeng could still suppress him. But now, he had lost to a disciple from the Tianfeng mansion. He looked at Xiao Chen with eyes full of hatred. Facing Zhang Mingfeng's gaze, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "What's wrong? You're not convinced?" Seeing the hatred in Zhang Mingfeng's eyes, Xiao Chen knew that this guy was not convinced. But so what? Even if they had to do it again, Xiao Chen could still defeat him. After 3 days of fierce fighting, Zhang Mingfeng was finally defeated. Facing such an outcome, the disciples of the Sky Mountain Mansion had an ugly look on their faces. On the other hand, the disciples of the Sky Wind Mansion were incomparably excited. No one knew who started it, but all of a sudden, the disciples of the Sky Wind Mansion shouted loudly, "Senior brother Xiao Chen, kill him, kill him." Everyone wanted Xiao Chen to kill Zhang Mingfeng. Hearing this, Zhang Mingfeng's eyes flashed with an undetectable trace of fear. This was the Hell Secret Realm, Tianfeng Xingzong's selection. Moreover, the 2 saint sovereigns had said that there was no need to take responsibility for anything that happened here. In other words, Xiao Chen could kill him with a single strike. Zhang Mingfeng looked at Xiao Chen with a complicated expression. As if sensing the fear in Zhang Mingfeng's heart, Xiao Chen said with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you afraid now?" Facing death, Zhang Mingfeng was indeed afraid, but he did not show it. Just as Xiao Chen finished speaking, Tianfeng Saint and Tianyue Saint appeared in the sky. With the arrival of the 2 saint sovereigns, the noisy scene quickly quieted down. At the same time, Tianfeng Saint looked at Xiao Chen and said indifferently, "All right, since you've won, let's call it a day. Killing him is meaningless to you." Hearing Tianfeng Saint's words, Xiao Chen did not hesitate to put away the ink dragon sword. Just as Tianfeng Saint had said, killing Zhang Mingfeng was meaningless to him. Since Tianfeng Saint had spoken, Xiao Chen naturally could not be stubborn. After putting away the black dragon sword, the 2 disciples from the Tianyue mansion quickly walked to Zhang Mingfeng's side and helped him up. Had been saved. Zhang Zhang's heart was not sure what was he thinking. Zhang Mingfeng's eyes had was heaven's lost had was lost was lost had been humiliated had been Shengzied? To the was Shingsby had. Haha, how is it? Do you still want to continue? Tianyue Mansion can still send people to continue the challenge. I can extend the time. Tianfeng Saint smiled as he watched Zhang Mingfeng being helped back into the crowd. Xiao Chun and Zhang Mingfeng's battle lasted for 3 days, and the Tianfeng Shengzong selection was considered to be over. However, due to the Tianyue sacred sect's appearance, Tianfeng Saint expressed that he could extend the time. After all, only Zhang Mingfeng from the Tianyue sacred sect had fought. The others had yet to fight. Tianyue Saint twitched the corner of his mouth when he heard Tianfeng Saint's words. Previously, the two of them had talked about who was stronger between Xiao Qin and Zhang Mingfeng. Tianfeng Saint had always said that Zhang Mingfeng was no match for Xiao Qin, and the facts had proven that to be the case. Now that even Zhang Mingfeng had been defeated, how could Tianyue Saint have the face to continue the challenge? He laughed loudly and said without the slightest embarrassment, "Haha, there's no hurry. There will be plenty of opportunities. Since the Tianfeng Shengzong selection is over, I'll take my leave." Tianyue Saint didn't seem to care about losing face at all. Tianfeng Saint shook his head helplessly. His junior brother had always been like this since he was young. He wasn't worried that Tianyue Saint would be unhappy because of this. Tianfeng Saint knew his junior brother's character too well. Without further ado, the hundreds of disciples of the Tianyue Mansion left under Tianyue Saint's lead. Of course, Gu Mu also bid farewell to Xiaoqin. Tianfeng Saint didn't ask Gu Mu to stay. After all, it was a good thing that Gu Mu and the others could enter the Tianyue sacred sect. Now that they knew their whereabouts, they would definitely meet again in the future. In the Tianhe continent, everyone was looking for their own opportunities. There was no need to interfere too much with others. After sending off the people of the Tianyue sacred sect, Tianfeng Saint looked at the disciples of the various sects below with a faint smile on his face. "All right, all of you can leave now. The sacred sect selection has ended. The results will be out soon." As he spoke, Tianfeng Saint waved his hand slightly. An irresistible power of law instantly shrouded the crowd. When they came back to their senses, they were already in the main square of Tianfeng Shengzong. Originally, it was impossible for Tianfeng Saint to show up in the sacred sect selection. Everything was handled by the half-saint elders. However, because of the matter of the Tianyue sacred sect, Tianfeng Saint showed up this time. He personally sent the crowd to the main square of Tianfeng Shengzong. At the same time, Tianfeng Saint was nowhere to be seen. Come to think of it, as a saint, Tianfeng Saint wouldn't care too much about these trivial matters. As they returned from the dark prison's secret realm, Tianfeng Shengzong's deacons quickly collected everyone's identity badges. These badges recorded everyone's points and name, so they could be used to calculate the results. After handing over their identity badges, the experts of the various sects of the Tianfeng Mansion also came to the main square. Accompanying them were the two elders of the sacred sect who opened the dark prison's secret realm. The month-long sacred sect selection had finally ended. This time, it could be said that some were happy, while others were sad. However, the ones with the worst expressions were naturally the people of the Iron Sword sect. This time, the Heavenly Sword sect could be said to have been completely annihilated. The reason for this was all because of one person, and this person was Xiao Qun. As soon as he appeared, the half-saint expert of the Iron Sword sect glared at Xiao Qun fiercely. The murderous intent in his eyes was extremely dense, as if he couldn't wait to swallow Xiao Qun alive. Regarding this, Xiao Qun didn't care. This was Tianfeng Shengzong. What could he do to him? As expected, although his heart was overflowing with murderous intent, the half-saint expert of the Iron Sword sect didn't do anything out of line. This was Tianfeng Shengzong. Naturally, he didn't dare to act recklessly. Otherwise, he would be greeted by Tianfeng Shengzong's punishment. Everyone gathered in the main square, and then the results were announced. First, the participants and vassals of the various sects were separated. Then, according to the points on everyone's identity badges, whether they could become a disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong would be determined. Chapter 571. There were not many participants from the various sects to begin with. After a month in the Dark Dungeon's secret realm, there were only 93 participants left. Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao, Mu Feng, and the others were naturally among them. Through the token, everyone's accumulated points were clear. Hence, it didn't take long for the results to be announced. There were a total of 93 participants. Anyone with more than 100 points would be able to enter Tianfeng Shengzong. Of course, these people could only be ordinary disciples. If they wanted to become an inner disciple, they would have to accumulate more than 1,000 points. For example, in the previous Sage Sect selections, there were only 5 people who became core disciples at most. The rest were just ordinary disciples. After the deacons finished tallying the points, the 2 Sage Sect elders began to announce the results. However, just as the 2 half-saint elders were about to begin, the Tianfeng saint's cold voice came from the sky. Xiao Chen is ranked first among the core disciples. The rest of the core disciples will take a step back. Chosen by the saint. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They didn't expect Xiao Chen to be chosen by the saint. This was a great honor. Furthermore, the Tianfeng saint had directly placed Xiao Chen as the first among the core disciples. One had to know that this was second only to the top 10 pro-disciples. In Tianfeng Shengzong, the disciples were divided into 3 levels: ordinary disciples, core disciples, and the top 10 pro-disciples. Of course, the ordinary disciples were also divided into 3 levels: heaven, earth, and mortal. However, the Tianfeng saint had directly chosen Xiao Chen as the first core disciple. One had to know that there were a total of 132 core disciples in Tianfeng Shengzong. Amongst these 132 core disciples, there was a ranking. The higher the ranking, the stronger the strength, and the higher the status. At the same time, they would receive more cultivation resources every month. There had never been anyone who became the first core disciple upon entering Tianfeng Shengzong. One had to know that in the previous Sage Sect selections, no matter how good their results were, they would only become core disciples. Moreover, they would only be ranked at the bottom. Without a doubt, the Tianfeng saint's words had allowed Xiao Chen to reach the top in one step. However, from another perspective, the Tianfeng saint's decision had also brought a lot of trouble for Xiao Chen. After all, how could the other core disciples accept a new disciple becoming the first core disciple? Therefore, once Xiao Chen entered Tianfeng Shengzong, there would be a lot of trouble. Those old core disciples definitely wouldn't be willing to be ranked below Xiao Chen. However, this was a topic for another time. Now that Tianfeng saint had spoken, no one dared to object. The 2 Glory Sect elders bowed respectfully. Yes. The selections hadn't started yet, but Xiao Chen's matter had already been decided. Regarding this, everyone from the Tianqi sect was naturally overjoyed. The first core disciple, Xiao Chen, had obtained such an honor. This was great news for the Tianqi sect. However, compared to the excitement of the Tianqi sect, the faces of the Iron Sword sect were ashen. Who would have thought that Xiao Chen had already caught the attention of the Tianfeng saint? If the Tianfeng saint really valued Xiao Chen, would the Iron Sword sect still dare to find trouble with him? Obviously, that was impossible. By then, the Iron Sword sect would probably take the initiative to resolve the grudge between the 2 sides with Xiao Chen. With the Tianfeng saint personally deciding on Xiao Chen's matter, the 2 Sage Sect elders also began to announce the results. They started with the ones with the lowest points. As expected, the Sage Sect selection this time wasn't easy. After the final confirmation, 33 out of the 93 participants were eliminated because their points didn't reach 100. At the same time, out of the remaining 60 participants, 56 became ordinary disciples, and only 4 became core disciples. Among the 4, Xiao Chen was one. The other 3 were Gu Lingyao, and 1 disciple each from the demon evil temple and the white mist sect. Such a result was obviously beyond everyone's expectations, because anyone could see that the Tianqi sect was undoubtedly the biggest winner of the Sage sect selection this time. This was because the Tianqi sect had 2 core disciples, and Shao Qin was the first core disciple. The result was unexpected, but it couldn't be changed. It was worth mentioning that Mu Feng had also successfully entered the Tianqi sect. However, because his results were only barely qualified, he only became an ordinary human class disciple. But this was already enough to make Mu Feng extremely excited. Mu Feng knew that he had done his best. Not to mention Shao Qin, even Chao He and Mu Feng were far behind. Therefore, Mu Feng was already very satisfied to be able to enter the Tianfeng Shengzong successfully. Being an ordinary human class disciple was nothing. After the results were announced, those who didn't qualify could return to where they came from. As for those who successfully entered the Tianfeng Shengzong, there were also special attendants who were responsible for taking them through a series of procedures. After a few words with Mu Feng and the others, Shao Qin, Gu Lingyao, and the 2 disciples from the Demon Evil Temple and the White Mist sect left in a group of 4. The living quarters of the core disciples were naturally different from those of the ordinary disciples. Following behind the attendants, Shao Qin and the other 3 could be considered to have experienced the magnificence of the Tianfeng Shengzong. The entire Tianfeng Shengzong was built on top of the Tianfeng Sacred Mountain. Starting from the foot of the mountain, the higher one went, the fewer buildings there were. With the mountainside as the dividing line, below the mountainside was the area of the ordinary disciples. The lower the level, the closer one was to the foot of the mountain. At night, the mountainside was where the core disciples, direct disciples, and elders lived. Similarly, the closer one was to the mountaintop, the higher one's status was. As for the mountaintop, there was no doubt that it was the residence of the Tianfeng saint. It belonged to the forbidden area of the Tianfeng Shengzong. All the way up the mountainside was the area of the core disciples. Compared to the ordinary disciples, the core disciples' area was more spacious and the illusion was more beautiful. Unlike the ordinary disciples, every core disciple of the Tianfeng Shengzong had their own individual courtyard. At the same time, they were also accompanied by maids. After leading Shao Qin and the others to the core disciples' area, the attendants said softly, "This is the core disciples' area. From here, you should have already discovered the special pattern of the buildings in the core disciples' area, right?" Hearing the attendant's words, the disciple from the Demon Evil Temple replied, "Naturally, the buildings in the core disciples' area are not side by side. Every building extends from the lowest to the highest, all the way to the mountaintop." That's right, this also represents the ranking of the core disciples. The lower the ranking of the core disciples, the closer they are to the mountainside. The higher the ranking of the core disciples, the closer they are to the mountaintop. For example, Shao Qin is now the number 1 core disciple. From his residence, you can already see the abodes of the 10 direct disciples. Hearing the answer of the Demon Evil Temple disciple, the attendants smiled and nodded. Chapter 572. Every core disciple's residence was directly related to their strength. The stronger the person, the better the residence. At the same time, the closer it was to the top of the mountain. Hearing the deacon's words, Shao Qin and the other 3 nodded slightly. They all secretly thought that the Windless Saints sect was really direct. However, it was precisely because of this rule that the disciples of the Windless Saints sect were all competitive. Everyone wanted to be ranked higher, and everyone wanted to be closer to the top of the mountain. This also led to the fights between the disciples of the Windless Saints sect. However, this was also a good thing. It was precisely because of this competitive atmosphere that the Windless Saints sect had been able to flourish for so long. Because every disciple wanted to become stronger, it was also unknowingly pushing Tianfeng Shengzong forward. At the same time, because there were endless fights between disciples every day for various reasons. Tianfeng Xingzong also had clear rules regarding the fights between disciples. First of all, disciples of different ranks could not privately challenge each other. For example, ordinary disciples could not privately challenge core disciples. They had to report to the elders of the saint sect. After obtaining approval, the saint sect would arrange the challenge. Secondly, if disciples of the same rank wanted to challenge each other, they had to go to the battle gate pavilion. There, they had to sign an agreement before the challenge could be carried out. Of course, the procedures for the challenge between disciples of the same rank were much simpler. To put it bluntly, they just had to go to the battle gate pavilion to confirm that both sides were willing. At the same time, they also had to confirm the wager of the challenge. It could be said that Tianfeng Xingzong had a very strict procedure for the challenge between disciples. All disciples had to follow this procedure. Otherwise, the result of the challenge would not be recognized, and they would also be severely punished by the saint sect. Xiao Chun and the other three obviously did not know much about these matters. However, the four of them would soon be familiar with it, especially Xiao Chun. Perhaps trouble would soon come knocking on their door. First, Gu Lingyao and the other two's residences were arranged. As expected, Gu Lingyao and the other two's residences were naturally the closest to the mountainside. It was at the end of all the core disciples. The three of them had no objections to this. Being able to become a core disciple as soon as they entered Tianfeng Xingzong was enough to be proud of. However, when they saw the deacon continue to lead Xiao Chun to the top of the mountain, Gu Lingyao and the other two's faces showed envy. They naturally knew that Xiao Chen's residence was the highest place in the entire core disciple area. Before he left, he said goodbye to Gu Lingyao, but the girl ignored him and only nodded with a red face. Seeing this, Xiao Chun could only smile bitterly. He thought to himself, how long has it been? This girl is still the same. I don't know what she's so shy about. She won't always be like this in front of me, right? He felt a little helpless, but he didn't think too much about it. In any case, everyone would be cultivating in the Heavenly Wind sacred sect in the future, so there was plenty of time. Furthermore, the reason why Gu Lingyao was like this was because she couldn't accept the fact that she was engaged to him. If he found an opportunity to talk about it, then there shouldn't be any problems. However, how should he talk about this? Xiao Chun didn't have any good ideas. He followed the deacon all the way to the first core disciple's residence. On the way, the deacon looked at Xiao Chun with a complicated expression. Xiao Chun, I don't know if I should say that you are lucky or unlucky. Oh? What do you mean by that, Sir Deacon? Xiao Chun asked curiously after hearing what the deacon had to say. Seeing that Xiao Chun didn't seem to realize the problems that might arise, the deacon helplessly shook his head and explained. You little brat, I don't know what to say to you. Don't tell me you don't realize the trouble you will face in the future? This time, the Lord personally appointed you as the first core disciple. This is indeed a great honor. It can be said that since the establishment of Tianfeng Xingzong, you are the first person to receive such treatment. However, under such a great honor, do you think that your position as the first core disciple will be stable? Let's put it this way. If you live in the first core disciple's residence today, I'm afraid that trouble will come knocking on your door tomorrow at the latest. Hearing the deacon's words, Xiao Chun naturally understood what he meant. The Tianfeng saint personally appointed him as the first core disciple. In this way, would the old core disciples be convinced? Especially the person who was originally the first core disciple. Because of his existence, he became the second core disciple for no reason. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be convinced. There would definitely be a lot of trouble, but what could he do? Even if Xiao Chun wanted to say that he didn't want to, what use would it be? Since the Heavenly Wind Holy Sect had already spoken, Xiao Chun could only bite the bullet and do it regardless of whether he was willing or not. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. This was Xiao Chun's current thought. Since it was too late to regret, he might as well accept it. Clearly aware of the trouble he was about to face, Xiao Chen didn't think too much about it. He only asked the deacon, "Is the result of a challenge between core disciples directly linked to the ranking?" Of course. Regardless of the level of the disciple, as long as they are recognized by the Battle Gate Pavilion, the result of the battle will naturally be directly linked to the ranking. The core disciples are no exception. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the deacon nodded and said truthfully, "Tianfeng Shengzong didn't have the tradition of holding a ranking battle. The ranking of each level of disciple was determined by the results of the battles between the disciples on a daily basis. As a result, the ranking was updated faster, and at the same time, the value of the rankings was also higher. However, at the same time, the competition was also more intense. Of course, the changes in the ranking weren't just the changes in the numbers. All kinds of treatment would also change. For example, if Xiao Chen was defeated by another core disciple, then Xiao Chen would have to give up his position as the first core disciple. At the same time, he would have to exchange his residence with the other core disciple. As they spoke, the two of them had already arrived at the residence of the first core disciple. The deacon took the initiative to knock on the door. Very quickly, a servant opened the door and walked out. Seeing this, the deacon explained his intentions. Not long after, a handsome young man wearing a golden robe walked out. This person was Tianfeng Shengzong's first core disciple, Bai Zhong. However, he was now the second core disciple. This was because his position was now Xiao Chen's. "Sir Deacon." Bai Zhong bowed and said. There wasn't much respect in his tone, and he was very calm. Hearing Bai Zhong's words, the deacon didn't care about his attitude. He revealed a helpless smile and said, "Bai Zhong, this is Xiao Chen, a new disciple participating in the Glory Sect's selection. The Saint Master personally appointed him as the new first core disciple. Therefore, your position will have to be moved back by one. At the same time, you will have to give up your residence to him." Chapter 573. Facing Bai Zhong, the deacon did not beat around the bush and directly stated the purpose of his visit. However, Bai Zhong's face instantly darkened when he heard this. He did not know about Xiao Chen's situation. After all, Tianfeng Shengzong did not announce it publicly. However, since the deacon dared to say this, it was obviously not baseless. In Tianfeng Shengzong, no one would dare to use the Tianfeng Saint's decree. Bai Zhong looked at Xiao Chen with a cold gaze. He could clearly feel the faint anger that was unconsciously emitted from his body. Facing Bai Zhong's gaze, Xiao Chen looked back calmly. He had already expected such an outcome. He had to give up the position of the number one core disciple for no reason. No one would be willing to accept it. Bai Zhong was the first to speak after their eyes met for a moment. His words were filled with disdain. He is just a new disciple. What right does he have to become the number one core disciple? I refuse to accept it. Bai Zhong, this was personally appointed by the Lord Saint. If you refuse to accept it, you can go and find the Lord Saint. However, you have to give up your position to Xiao Chen now. Hearing Bai Zhong's words, the deacon said calmly. Obviously, he had already expected Bai Zhong's reaction and had prepared his speech beforehand. Hearing the deacon's words, Bai Zhong's face turned ugly. Since the Tianfeng Saint had personally appointed him, he naturally did not dare to defy him. Bai Zhong looked coldly at Xiao Chen and said in a deep voice, "I don't care who you are, but I will definitely take back what is mine." After speaking, Bai Zhong turned and left without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply. He simply gave up the position of the number one core disciple. Seeing Bai Zhong leave, although he didn't do anything extreme, anyone could guess that Bai Zhong wouldn't give up so easily. "Xiao Chen, the number one core disciple position is now yours. However, whether or not you can keep it depends on yourself." After successfully arranging for Xiao Chen's residence, the deacon said plainly. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Thank you, deacon. No need to be so courteous. This is your token. Work hard. I'm afraid you'll have a lot of trouble in the future. Besides, no one can help you with these things. As long as Bai Zhong doesn't break the rules of Glory Sect, everything will depend on you. The deacon waved his hand casually and replied. He handed over an identity token to Xiao Chen. This was Xiao Chen's identity token. At the same time, he also handed over a storage ring. In the storage ring, there were some medicinal pills and several sets of Tianfeng Shengzong core disciple uniforms. After receiving these things, the deacon did not stay for long. He simply turned around and left. He had already done everything he could. Bai Zhong had also taken the initiative to give up the residence of the first core disciple. However, everyone's expression was not too good. Everyone's face was gloomy, and one of them could not help but scold in a deep voice. This ignorant thing, a mere new disciple, dares to steal senior brother Bai Zhong's position. He's courting death. Because of Xiao Chen's existence, all the core disciples were pushed back by one position. It could be said that unknowingly, Xiao Chen had offended many core disciples. Hearing this person's words, Bai Zhong's face was gloomy as well. However, he did not scold him, and only said coldly, "Don't worry, this kid won't be arrogant for long. The higher he stands now, the harder I will trample on him. What belongs to me, Bai Zhong, no one can take it away." Bai Zhong would not let Xiao Chen go. At the same time, after one night, Xiao Chen's deeds were quickly spread in Tianfeng Shengzong. A new disciple, who was appointed by the Lord, directly became the number 1 core disciple. Such news was undoubtedly explosive. After hearing this news, whether it was the core disciples or the ordinary disciples, they were all shocked. After all, Tianfeng Shengzong had been established for many years, and Xiao Chen was the first person to receive such treatment. Many disciples were talking about Xiao Chen, but at the same time, many people were waiting to see Xiao Chen make a fool of himself. They knew that although Xiao Chen was very popular now, if he did not have the corresponding strength, he would not be able to keep these things. In the end, he might only end up humiliating himself. Chapter 574. There was a lot of discussion about Xiao Chen in the outside world. As the first disciple to receive such an honor upon entering Tianfeng Shengzong, Xiao Chen naturally became a celebrity in Tianfeng Shengzong. Even the 10 core disciples had heard of Xiao Chen. At this time, not far from where Xiao Chen lived, there was a cloud shrouding the area. It looked like a fairyland. To all Tianfeng Shengzong disciples, this cloud-shrouded area could be said to be the place of dreams, because this was where the 10 core disciples lived. Unlike the core disciples, there were only 10 core disciples in Tianfeng Shengzong. Every time a new core disciple was born, it meant that an old core disciple had to leave, either to become a deacon of Glory Sect, or to return to being a core disciple. Just like the core disciples, the residences of the 10 core disciples also extended towards the top of the mountain. The highest cave residence was already very close to the top of the mountain. It was even higher than the residences of the normal elders. From this, one could see how high the status of the 10 core disciples in Tianfeng Shengzong was. At this time, in one of the residences, 2 young men were sitting opposite each other. The 2 of them were drinking wine and chatting idly. Seems like Glory Sect's selection this time round has produced some interesting little fellas. That Xiao Chen was actually chosen as the number 1 core disciple by Glory Sect's master. That's a bit surprising. After taking a sip of the wine in his cup, one of them said with a smile. Hearing this person's words, the other person said with a look of disdain, "That's not a good thing. As the saying goes, the higher you stand, the harder you fall. If you don't have the strength, but you get something that doesn't belong to you, your ending won't be too good." Junior brother, you're right. But I think that Xiao Chen shouldn't be an ordinary person. Alright, let's not talk about it. I heard that junior brother has his eyes on that female disciple called Gu Lingyao? Haha, looks like I really can't hide anything from senior brother. Junior brother is indeed in love with Gu Lingyao. The two of them chatted as they drank. Judging from their attire, the two of them were Tianfeng Xingzong's 10 direct disciples. Among them, the disciple who favored Shao Chun was named Yu Cheng, ranked 9th among the 10 direct disciples. As for the disciple who favored Gu Lingyao, his name was He Chushuan, ranked 10th among the 10 direct disciples. Seeing the undisguised adoration in He Chushuan's eyes when he talked about Gu Lingyao, Yu Cheng smiled and said, "But I heard that Gu Lingyao and Shao Chun are both from the Tianqi sect. It seems that the two of them are already engaged." The matter between Shao Chun and Gu Lingyao was not a secret, so it was not difficult to find out. Hearing Yu Cheng's words, He Chushuan obviously knew about this matter, but he did not care at all. So what if they are engaged? A beauty like Gu Lingyao is not something an ordinary person can have. Shao Chun better be sensible, otherwise I don't mind teaching him a lesson. He did not care that Gu Lingyao and Shao Chun were engaged. After all, it was only an engagement, not a marriage. Hearing He Chushuan's words, Yu Cheng shook his head with a smile, and did not say anything more. To be honest, among the 10 direct disciples, He Chushuan's strength was the weakest, and his temperament was also the worst. He was arrogant and somewhat condescending. For this reason, Yu Cheng had also scolded him before, but it seemed to have no effect. He no longer bothered about Gu Lingyao's matter. Anyway, it did not matter to him. In Yu Cheng's heart, his interest in Shao Chun was far greater than Gu Lingyao's. He wanted to see how this boy, who became the first core disciple as soon as he entered Tianfeng Xingzong, would face the troubles that followed. He did not know that even the 10 direct disciples were already paying attention to his affairs. At this time, in Shao Chen's residence, Tianguochuan, several elders, Gu Lingyao, and 2 other core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong sat together. A total of 12 people were sitting together. Tianguochuan and the others would return to the Tianqi sect tomorrow. Today, they came specially to say goodbye and also to give Shao Chun a few words. While drinking, Tianguochuan looked at Shao Chun and said, "Shao Chun, I'm afraid that you will have a lot of trouble in Tianfeng Xingzong in the future. Moreover, you don't know much about the situation in Tianfeng Xingzong. These two were once disciples of my Tianqi sect. Now, they are core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong, just like you. You can get closer in the future and help each other if anything happens." Tianguochuan, on the other hand, did not stand on ceremony. He directly stated the purpose of his visit and introduced the 2 core disciples to Shao Chun. The 2 of them were named Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong. Both of them were once disciples of the Tianqi sect. In fact, the situation in Tianfeng Xingzong could be said to be both complicated and simple at the same time. All in all, the disciples of the Heavenly Wind Saints sect were basically selected from the various major sects and empires of the Heavenly Wind Prefecture. Because of this, the people from different sects and empires had formed many small groups within the Heavenly Wind Saints sect. It could be said that Glory sect was a big sect in Tianfeng Xingzong. However, there were many factions within it. The formation of these factions was naturally inseparable from the major sects and empires of Tianfeng Prefecture. However, the Heavenly Wind Saints sect did not stop them and allowed them to form their own factions. As long as they did not do anything that would harm the Heavenly Wind Saints sect, the Heavenly Wind Saints sect could not be bothered with the conflicts between the factions. Like other forces, the Tianqi sect also had its own forces in Tianfeng Xingzong. Naturally, the 2 core disciples, Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong, were the leaders. Tianguochuan had specially brought the 2 of them here today because he hoped that they could help Shao Chun more in the future. Everyone was from the Tianqi sect. Now that they were in Tianfeng Xingzong, they naturally had to help each other. However, as soon as Tianguochuan finished speaking, before Shao Chun could say anything, Zhang Tao said with an unhappy face, "Originally, we were all from the Tianqi sect, so we could be considered brothers. However, as the saying goes, heaven's disaster can be avoided. Some people are looking for death. Even if we want to help, I'm afraid we can't. Zhang Tao's words were obviously scolding the locust tree. At the same time, he did not hide the strong taste of jealousy in his words. Hearing this, Tian Guochuan's face darkened. Xiao Qin smiled slightly and looked at Zhang Tao with interest. This guy was obviously jealous that he became the first core disciple as soon as he entered Tianfeng Xingzong. Zhang Tao, shut up. What do you mean by this? Xiao Qin was not angry at all, but Tian Guochuan had already shouted angrily. Chapter 575. Zhang Tao's words infuriated Tian Guochuan. The main purpose of his visit today was to introduce Xiao Qin to Zhang Tao and the others. After all, they were all from the Tianqi sect and should take care of each other in the future. Moreover, Tian Guochuan had his own selfish motives for introducing Zhang Tao and the other man to Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin's talent was obvious to all. His combat strength had shocked Tian Guochuan. After witnessing the entire selection process of the Sage sect, Tian Guochuan could guarantee that Xiao Qin was definitely stronger than Zhang Tao and the other man in terms of strength, even though he was just a new disciple. To put it bluntly, Tian Guochuan's intention of introducing Zhang Tao and the other man to Xiao Qin was to help them. At the same time, he wanted to rely on Xiao Qin to let the Tianqi sect disciples in Tianfeng Xingzong reach a higher level. It was ridiculous that Zhang Tao, this idiot, didn't understand this point and even dared to speak arrogantly to Xiao Qin. Therefore, Tian Guochuan was naturally furious. He was simply a pig. Facing Tian Guochuan's angry roar, Zhang Tao's eyes flashed with anger. He said coldly, "Elder Tian, am I wrong? Some people don't have strength, yet they want to touch things that don't belong to them. Isn't such a person looking for death?" Zhang Tao had successfully joined Tianfeng Xingzong, so he wasn't too afraid of Tian Guochuan. After all, Tian Guochuan couldn't, or rather, he didn't dare to, do anything to Zhang Tao now. Seeing that Zhang Tao didn't even give him face, Tian Guochuan's face was gloomy to the extreme. At this moment, Xiao Qin, who had been silent all this time, said faintly, "Elder Tian, there's no need to be angry with him. He's just a frog at the bottom of a well." Xiao Qin knew very well why Tian Guochuan brought Zhang Tao and the other man here today. However, since Zhang Tao didn't know what was good for him, Xiao Qin naturally wouldn't care about his life or death in the future. Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong, these two guys could only be considered to be below average among the core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong. One was ranked 78th and the other was ranked 83rd. If it was because of their connection to the Tianqi sect, Xiao Qin wouldn't even look at them. Xiao Qin persuaded Tian Guochuan not to be angry. Gu Lingyao, who was on the side, also looked at Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong with a displeased expression. He thought that these two guys really didn't know what was good for them and were extremely stupid. They didn't understand Tian Guochuan's meaning at all. They thought that Tian Guochuan wanted them to help Xiao Qin. They didn't know that Tian Guochuan actually wanted Xiao Qin to help them more. Xiao Qin didn't have the slightest intention of getting angry. Hearing this, Zhang Tao curled his lips and thought indifferently in his heart, "Boy, I'll let you continue to pretend. Let's see how long you can be free." Just as Xiao Qin finished speaking, a maid in charge of serving Xiao Qin hurriedly ran in and said to Xiao Qin with a serious expression, "Senior brother Xiao Qin, it's not good. Senior brother Wang Helu is here." Wang Helu. Hearing these three words, Zhang Tao immediately sneered, "Xiao Qin, I just said that you're courting death. Now it's come true. Senior brother Wang Helu is ranked 12th among the core disciples. He's extremely powerful." Wang Helu's personal visit was naturally not a good thing. Regarding this, Zhang Tao didn't care about his relationship with Xiao Qin at all and immediately mocked him. Zhang Tao naturally didn't have any intention of standing up for Xiao Qin. What a joke, Wang Helu was much stronger than him. If Zhang Tao stood up for him, he would undoubtedly be courting death. In the face of Zhang Tao's mockery, Xiao Chen simply couldn't be bothered with him. He indifferently glanced at him, then immediately got up and walked out of the courtyard. To be honest, Xiao Chen didn't even have the mood to argue with someone like Zhang Tao. Firstly, a person like Zhang Tao didn't pose a threat to him. Secondly, Zhang Tao was just a clown, extremely laughable. Ignoring Zhang Tao, Xiao Chen directly strode out of the courtyard. Seeing this, Gu Lingyao also hurriedly followed. Tian Guochuan, Zhang Tao and the rest also unhurriedly followed behind. The group strode to the courtyard outside of Xiao Chen's residence. At a glance, they saw 5 young men wearing the Tianfeng Xingzong core disciple robes standing there proudly. The leader had an arrogant expression on his face. He must be Wang Helu. Directly stepping in front of Wang Helu, Xiao Chen calmly looked at him and said, "You're looking for me? You're that Xiao Chen?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Wang Helu coldly laughed and said, "I'm Xiao Chen. Today I'm here to tell you that if you don't have the qualifications to have something, it will only attract trouble. The number 1 core disciple position isn't something you can have. If I were you, I would choose to take the initiative to give it up. Otherwise, I'm afraid that your future days won't be good." Hearing Wang Helu's words, a faint smile appeared on Xiao Chen's face. Wang Helu really came to look for trouble. Hearing his words, Xiao Chen said with some amusement, "It seems that I still overestimated that Bai Zhong. If he doesn't accept the number 1 core disciple position, he could go to the Battle Gate Pavilion and apply for a battle. If he wins, the number 1 core disciple position would naturally be his. However, he didn't dare to come and only sent a dog to test my limit. Haha, simply laughable. Since he despises me so much, why did he still come to test me? What a disgrace." Even if he used his toes to think, he would know that Wang Helu had clearly received instructions from Bai Zhong to come here today. His purpose was nothing more than to test his own worth. It had to be said that Bai Zhong's actions made Xiao Chen instantly look down on him. Originally, he thought that since Bai Zhong could become the number 1 core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, then Bai Zhong should be a number 1 figure. However, it seemed that he had thought too much. Bai Zhong didn't even have the courage to challenge him, yet he still wanted to test him. Little did he know that Bai Zhong had not only sent Wang Helu to test Xiao Chen's limits, but also exposed the nervousness and fear in Bai Zhong's heart. That's right, although he said that he looked down on Xiao Chen, refused to accept Xiao Chen, and didn't put Xiao Chen in his eyes, on the other hand, he sent someone to test Xiao Chen. Wasn't this the same as slapping his own face? If Bai Zhong felt that he could hear Xiao Chen's voice and had full confidence in himself, then why would he make such an unnecessary move? Feeling Xiao Chen's deep contempt for Bai Zhong, Wang Helu's face turned red. He felt a little embarrassed, but at the same time, a wave of anger rose. A new disciple actually dared to be so insolent. How could Wang Helu be a human? He immediately shouted angrily, "Xiao Chen, do you think that you are worthy of being senior brother Bai Zhong's enemy? Today, I came here without anyone's orders. You are not worthy of senior brother Bai Zhong personally taking action. I, Wang Helu, am enough to teach you a lesson. Don't be so arrogant." He couldn't lose face for Bai Zhong. However, after hearing Wang Helu's words, Xiao Chen couldn't help but laugh. This Wang Helu, he hadn't even said anything yet, but he was already so agitated. Chapter 576. Wang Helu shouted angrily. It was at this moment that Zhang Tao stood out and reprimanded Xiao Chen like a senior brother. Perhaps he was trying to please Wang Helu and Bai Zhong behind him. Zhang Tao did not know what he was thinking. Perhaps he was trying to please Wang Helu and Bai Zhong behind him. Junior brother Xiao Chen, you're too unreasonable. You've already committed a big mistake by occupying senior brother Bai Zhong's residence. It's fine that senior brother Bai Zhong doesn't bicker with you, but how can you act so recklessly? Hurry up and apologize to senior brother Wang Helu. Zhang Tao's words were filled with righteousness, and he completely regarded himself as Xiao Chen's senior brother. Hearing this, Wang Helu's gaze fell on Zhang Tao. As a core disciple, Wang Helu naturally knew Zhang Tao. However, because Zhang Tao's ranking was too low among the core disciples, Wang Helu usually looked down on him, so the two of them didn't have much interaction. At this moment, Zhang Tao's sudden appearance made Wang Helu somewhat suspicious. What exactly was the relationship between Zhang Tao and Xiao Chen? Sensing Wang Helu's gaze, Zhang Tao was delighted. To put it bluntly, in the past, it was impossible for Zhang Tao to talk to Wang Helu. Now that there was such an opportunity, how could Zhang Tao let it go? He bowed to Wang Helu like a lackey and said respectfully, "Senior brother Wang, Xiao Chen and I are both from the Celestial Equal sect. I can also be considered as Xiao Chen's senior brother. Today's matter was due to my lack of discipline. I hope senior brother Wang can forgive me. I will definitely give senior brother Wang an explanation for this matter." After saying that, Zhang Tao turned to glare at Xiao Chen and shouted angrily, "Xiao Chen, did you hear that? Hurry up and apologize to senior brother Wang." Otherwise, Zhang Tao still wanted to reprimand Xiao Chen, but before he could finish his sentence, he heard a slap and his voice came to an abrupt halt. At the same time, a blood-red palm print appeared on his face. Originally, he didn't want to pay too much attention to a guy like Zhang Tao, but who knew that this idiot actually went overboard? Did he really think that they were from the same sect? It was simply ridiculous. Being interrupted by Xiao Chen's slap, Zhang Tao was stunned at first, but he soon became furious. In Zhang Tao's heart, he had always regarded himself as Xiao Chen's senior brother, so when facing Xiao Chen, Zhang Tao was very arrogant and jealous. It couldn't be helped. After all, Xiao Chen became the #1 core disciple as soon as he entered Tianfeng Xingzong. This status was much higher than Zhang Tao's. After being stunned for a moment, Zhang Tao flew into a rage and roared, "Xiao Chen, you dare to hit me? I'm your senior brother. How dare you hit me? Idiot, did I admit that you're my senior brother? Get lost, I don't want to talk to an idiot." Hearing Zhang Tao's scolding, Xiao Chen said calmly. Zhang Tao's IQ really made Xiao Chen too lazy to say a word to him. Such a person was an idiot, and the kind that was incurable. He didn't put Zhang Tao in his eyes at all. Seeing this, Zhang Tao was completely furious. His eyes seemed to spit fire, and he fiercely punched at Xiao Chen. He directly attacked Xiao Chen. Facing Zhang Tao's attack, Xiao Chen was also completely angry. He didn't dodge, and met Zhang Tao's fist with a punch. With a muffled sound, the two fists collided fiercely. The result of a head-on collision was obvious. How could Zhang Tao be Xiao Chen's opponent? With a scream, Zhang Tao was directly sent flying. His entire right arm was completely broken, and blood kept flowing out. After crippling Zhang Tao with a punch, he fell heavily to the ground. Zhang Tao looked at Xiao Chen in disbelief. When he came into contact with Xiao Chen just now, Zhang Tao had already regretted it. It was as if he had hit an iron plate. Zhang Tao couldn't understand how Xiao Chen's body could be so strong. In fact, Zhang Tao didn't think about it. How could Xiao Chen, who was appointed as the first core disciple by Tianfeng Saint, be weak? Even Bai Zhong knew this, so he sent people to test Zhang Tao. Unfortunately, Zhang Tao, this idiot, didn't realize it himself. After crippling Zhang Tao with a punch, Xiao Chen glanced at him indifferently and said, "My temper is not very good, and there is a limit to my patience. If I see you flying around like a fly in front of me in the future, it won't be as simple as today." Originally, he didn't want to pay attention to Zhang Tao, but this guy was courting death. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhang Tao lowered his head and didn't dare to say a word. He finally realized that Xiao Chen wasn't as simple as he had imagined. At the same time, he also understood Tian Guochuan's real intention today. Tian Guochuan wanted Xiao Chen to help him and Li Chenglong, and didn't want him and Li Chenglong to help Xiao Chen. He lowered his head silently. Xiao Chen didn't pay attention to him, he was just a clown. He then looked at Wang Helu and said indifferently, "If you don't agree, let Bai Zhong do it himself. I'm not interested in small fries." After saying this, Xiao Chen didn't wait for Wang Helu to reply. He directly turned around and walked into the courtyard. Seeing this, Wang Helu was furious. Xiao Chen was blatantly ignoring him. Wang Helu immediately shouted angrily and violently attacked Xiao Chen. "Xiao Chen, you're courting death. Do you think I'm an idiot like Zhang Tao? Today, I'll teach you a lesson." Wang Helu attacked. In Tianfeng Xingzong, disciples were not prohibited from fighting in private, as long as they didn't die or become disabled. Therefore, many times in Tianfeng Xingzong, it was possible to see disciples fighting because of a disagreement. Of course, such private fights were not recognized by the sect. In other words, even if Wang Helu won this fight, Xiao Chen would still be the first core disciple. If he wanted to be recognized by the sect, he would have to go to the Battle Gate Pavilion. Disciples were not prohibited from fighting in private, so Wang Helu naturally didn't have any scruples when he attacked. He attacked with all his strength. Facing Wang Helu's attack, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Xiao Chen was already familiar with the rules of Tianfeng Xingzong, so he wasn't afraid of causing any trouble. He turned around and threw a punch at Wang Helu. Immediately, Wang Helu was forced back a few steps. At the same time, Xiao Chen didn't stop. He immediately used the dragon's spring sword finger. With a dragon's roar, a sword light enveloped Wang Helu. From Wang Helu's attack to Xiao Chen's counterattack, it only took the blink of an eye. In the face of Xiao Chen's dragon's spring sword finger, Wang Helu's eyes flashed with a hint of panic. He didn't expect Xiao Chen to be so strong. Unsurprisingly, Wang Helu was defeated by the dragon's spring sword finger. Although he wasn't seriously injured, Xiao Chen used his strength to tell Wang Helu how big the gap between them was. Chapter 577. Xiao Chen defeated Wang Helu with a single finger. Although he wasn't seriously injured, Wang Helu knew clearly that Xiao Chen's strength far exceeded his, because when Xiao Chen attacked just now, Wang Helu clearly felt that Xiao Chen had deliberately held back his strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't have felt as good as he did now. Wang Helu looked at Xiao Chen with uncertain eyes. He was no longer as arrogant as before. That's right, he came here today under Bai Zhong's instructions to test Xiao Chen's strength. Now that the results were out, Wang Helu couldn't accept it because he couldn't see through Xiao Chen's strength. Get lost. Tell Bai Zhong that he doesn't need to use these boring methods anymore. If he wants to take back everything that belongs to him, he can challenge me directly. I, Xiao Chen, will accept it. Xiao Chen didn't care about the change in Wang Helu's expression and said indifferently. Without waiting for Wang Helu's reply, Xiao Chen turned around and returned to the courtyard. Seeing this, Wang Helu and the others looked at each other in dismay. However, they also knew that they wouldn't be able to gain anything if they continued to pester Xiao Chen. They might even lose face. Therefore, they chose to leave with their tails between their legs. After Wang Helu and the others left, Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong appeared very embarrassed. They came with Tian Guochuan, but because of what happened just now, Xiao Chen obviously didn't want to see them. This could be seen from Xiao Chen ignoring them. Seeing Xiao Chen striding into the yard, Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong wanted to follow him, but they did not dare to. Tian Guochuan saw the awkwardness of the two, so he took the initiative to come to them and said with an exasperated look, "You two go back first." Originally, he wanted to introduce Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong to Xiao Chen, but who would have thought that this idiot Zhang Tao would be so brainless? Now, it seemed that Xiao Chen wouldn't accept them, at least not in a short period of time. After hearing Tian Guochuan's words, Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong left in disappointment. After dealing with Wang Helu and his group of small fries, Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong, the two idiots, had just left. They returned to the courtyard. The atmosphere was obviously much more lively. Everyone consciously didn't mention what had just happened and just drank and chatted. Tomorrow, Tian Guochuan and the others would leave Tianjin Xingzhou. Before leaving, Tian Guochuan said embarrassedly to Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin, although Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong have crossed this time, they are both from the Equal Heavens sect after all. If possible in the future, if you can help them as much as possible. If you can help them in the future. If you can. If you can help them in the future. If you can. If you can you. If you can help them if. Is. At the last moment, Tian Guochuan couldn't help but say. After all, everyone was from the Celestial Equal sect and Tian Guochuan's wish was very simple. He hoped that everyone could unite. After all, in Tianjin Xingzhou, where there were many factions, if they weren't united, their lives wouldn't be good. After hearing Tian Guochuan's words, Xiao Qin nodded slightly and didn't say much. Let's talk about the future later. If Zhang Tao and Li Chenglong could be more honest, Xiao Qin wouldn't take today's matter to heart. But if they were still so stupid, Xiao Qin naturally wouldn't care about their lives. Seeing Xiao Qin nod in agreement, Tian Guochuan didn't say anything more and left with the few elders of the Celestial Equal sect. Now that the Glory sect selection was over, Tian Guochuan couldn't control what would happen in Tianjin Xingzhou. But thinking about it, with Xiao Qin's strength, he wouldn't do too badly in Tianjin Xingzhou. He personally sent Tian Guochuan and the others off. At the same time, in the second core disciples' courtyard not far from Xiao Qin's, it had become Baizhong's residence. In the main hall, Baizhong and the other 4 core disciples sat together in a circle. Wang Helu stood in the middle of the hall with his head lowered, looking like a child who had done something wrong. After a while, Baizhong looked at Wang Helu and said calmly, "You're saying that you can't see through Xiao Qin's strength?" Hearing Baizhong's words, Wang Helu's body trembled slightly, then he replied respectfully, "Yes. Today when I fought with Xiao Qin, I lost to him in 2 moves. And I'm sure that Xiao Qin didn't use his full strength when fighting with me." He told Baizhong everything that had happened today. Hearing Wang Helu's words, Baizhong's eyes flashed with coldness. He pursed his lips and didn't say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. He purposely let Wang Helu test Xiao Qin, but in the end, he didn't get anything. As a result, Baizhong's fear of Xiao Qin naturally increased. In fact, from the beginning, Baizhong knew that Xiao Qin, as a new disciple, was appointed by the Sacred Master and became the first core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzhou. He definitely wasn't a simple person. Because of this, Baizhong didn't act rashly. After a long silence, Baizhong finally sneered, "It seems that our new junior brother, Xiao, really can't be underestimated." "Senior brother Baizhong, I have a good plan here." Hearing Baizhong's words, a feminine youth sitting below him smiled slightly. "Junior brother Lu, quickly say it," Baizhong asked when he heard the feminine youth's words. "Actually, it won't be difficult for senior brother Baizhong to deal with Xiao Qin. Senior brother Baizhong might be wary of him if he's in his best condition, but if he's injured, senior brother Baizhong can easily defeat him," the feminine youth said indifferently. "That's a good idea. But how do we injure Xiao Qin?" "Junior brother, I heard that senior brother He Chushuan seems to be interested in Gu Lingyao and has clearly stated that Gu Lingyao is his woman. Moreover, Gu Lingyao and Xiao Qin are both from the Tianqi sect. I heard that they are engaged. If we," the feminine youth said unhurriedly. After hearing his words, Baizhong immediately burst into laughter. "Haha, good, good. Junior brother Lu's plan of killing someone with a borrowed knife is really ingenious. If senior brother He Chushuan really teaches Xiao Qin a lesson, I will take the opportunity to issue a challenge and defeat Xiao Qin easily. Haha, not bad, not bad." He didn't dare to attack Xiao Qin rashly. However, if it was Xiao Qin, it would be a different story. Bai Zhong was very satisfied with junior brother Lu's plan. Moreover, the success rate was very high because as long as he made use of Gu Lingyao, He Chuxuan would be able to attack Xiao Chen easily. After coming up with a plan to deal with Xiao Chen, Bai Zhong was in a good mood. He immediately handed this matter over to junior brother Lu. Naturally, junior brother Lu didn't refuse and promised that he would handle it properly. Xiao Chen, I don't believe that you're not afraid of a personal disciple. This time, I must make you fall from a high height. With a plan in mind, Bai Zhong thought viciously. Chapter 578. Bai Zhong and the others came up with a brilliant plan to deal with Xiao Chen. Of course, Xiao Chen did not know about it. Of course, even if he knew, Xiao Chen would only look down on Bai Zhong even more. When facing an enemy, there was nothing wrong with using unscrupulous means. However, Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong were from the same sect. Bai Zhong had to resort to underhanded means that he was a despicable person. At the same time, he was extremely wary of Xiao Chen. Just as Bai Zhong and the others came up with a plan to deal with Xiao Chen, at the peak of Tianfeng Xingzong, where the Tianfeng saint resided, he was sitting opposite a white-haired but fair-skinned old man. The white-haired old man was the great elder of Tianfeng Xingzong. At the same time, he could be said to be the actual person in charge of Tianfeng Xingzong. After all, the Tianfeng saint did not care about the affairs of Glory sect. He was the great elder. The great elder's name was Hifeng. He was at the peak of the half-saint realm. He was only one step away from breaking through to the saint realm. Unfortunately, Hifeng had been stuck at this step for hundreds of years. As he grew older, Hifeng knew very well that he would never be able to step into the saint realm in this lifetime. Hifeng and the Tianfeng saint sat opposite each other, drinking wine. Hifeng said casually, "Saint, you personally appointed Xiao Chen as the first core disciple. I'm afraid he won't have a good time these days. Bai Zhong's character is not good." Hifeng said casually. However, it was not hard to tell that he had heard of Bai Zhong's character. He was sure that Bai Zhong would not let Xiao Chen go. Hearing Hifeng's words, the Tianfeng saint smiled. "It's because of Bai Zhong's character that I let Xiao Chen replace him. As the first core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, Bai Zhong is not qualified." Bai Zhong was narrow-minded, vengeful, and despicable. Both the Tianfeng saint and Hifeng knew that Bai Zhong was very talented. However, Bai Zhong's talent was very good, and he was undoubtedly the strongest among all the core disciples. Therefore, Tianfeng saint and Hifeng turned a blind eye to it. But in their hearts, Bai Zhong was indeed not qualified to be the first core disciple of the Tianfeng saint sect. They didn't touch him before because no one could replace him. But now that Xiao Chen had appeared, Tianfeng saint naturally took advantage of the situation to remove Bai Zhong. Hearing Tianfeng saint's words, Hifeng smiled and said, "But can Xiao Chen withstand Bai Zhong's revenge? You don't have to worry about that. If that kid can't even deal with Bai Zhong, he won't be worthy of our attention, let alone becoming one of the top 10 pro-disciples in the future." The Tianfeng saint smiled. Hifeng's heart sank. Although the Tianfeng saint did not say it explicitly, Hifeng had already guessed that the Tianfeng Xingzong had high hopes for Xiao Chen. The first core disciple position was simply a springboard for Xiao Chen. In the Tianfeng saint's heart, Xiao Chen's final destination should be one of the top 10 pro-disciples. To put it bluntly, the title of the number 1 core disciple was a small test given to Xiao Chen by the Tianfeng saint. If Xiao Chen could not even pass this test, then he could forget about becoming one of the top 10 personal disciples. This was because any one of the top 10 personal disciples was much more difficult to deal with than Bai Zhong. If even Bai Zhong could not handle it, how could Xiao Chen face the top 10 personal disciples? Thinking of this, Hifeng thought to himself, "Bai Zhong, oh Bai Zhong, don't set yourself on fire." Xiao Chen did not know that the Tianfeng saint and Hifeng would talk about him. He also did not know that the Tianfeng saint had such high hopes for him. After a night of silence, Shao Chun exited his cultivation early in the morning. It had been 3 days since he joined the Tianfeng Xingzong. It was time to check out the benefits that the Tianfeng Xingzong had given him. There were naturally benefits for passing the glory sex selection. Especially for people like Shao Chun who had directly become core disciples, there were even more benefits. First of all, Shao Chun and the other 3 could go to the martial technique pavilion to pick a heaven-level upper-class martial technique for free. Secondly, there were some pills and talismans as rewards. Of course, Shao Chun did not care too much about these 2 things at the moment. After all, he still had a few heaven-level martial techniques that he had not mastered yet. For example, Shao Chun had not mastered the heaven-level sword Shadow, Ganjiang Finger Sword, and Tiger Stampede. Therefore, Shao Chun did not plan to learn any other heaven-level martial techniques in the short term. Shao Chun knew the principle of biting off more than one could chew. Shao Chun did not have too many thoughts about heaven-level martial techniques, at least not in the short term. As for pills and talismans, Shao Chun was not in urgent need of them at the moment. But other than these 2, Tianfeng Xingzong also had another reward. And this reward made Shao Chun very excited. It was the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room. This Earthly Fire Cultivation Room was Tianfeng Xingzong's exclusive secret cultivation room. There was only one use, and that was to temper one's cultivation and make one's cultivation realm more stable. According to the rules, except for the top 10 pro-disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong, the rest of the disciples who wanted to use the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room had to exchange points for it. And the price was very high. However, as a new disciple and a core disciple, Shao Chun was rewarded with a whole month of free use of the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room. One must know that even Gu Lingyao and the other 2 only got 3 days, but Shao Chun got a whole month, which was 10 times more than the 3 of them. Shao Chun had broken through to the doctrine realm with the help of the Taoist formation. Although his cultivation realm seemed to be very stable, he also knew that it was not suitable for him to break through again in the short term. Secondly, he had to find a way to eliminate these hidden dangers. It was also because of this that the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room was extremely important to Shao Chun. After washing up and changing into a clean set of clothes, Shao Chun walked to the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room alone. He originally wanted to call Gu Lingyao, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. After all, this girl had been deliberately avoiding him all this time. Every time he was with her, she would have a shy expression on her face. It was not appropriate to call her now, and Shao Chun would also feel very awkward. He arrived at the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room alone. It was a cave that led directly to the interior of Tianfeng's sacred mountain, and this was the entrance to the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room. As the exclusive cultivation holy land of Tianfeng Xingzong, the Earthly Fire Cultivation Room was naturally bustling with people. Of course, most of them were ordinary disciples. After all, Tianfeng Xingzong had close to 100,000 ordinary disciples, while there were only about 100 core disciples. Seeing Shao Chun, who was wearing the core disciple uniform, appear here, many of the ordinary disciples in the surroundings were in awe. There was no other way. In Tianfeng Xingzong, the difference in status and treatment between each level of disciple could be said to be like heaven and earth. For ordinary disciples, core disciples were existences that they could not afford to provoke. Chapter 579. Many ordinary disciples looked at Shao Chun in awe. Ordinary disciples were divided into 3 levels: heaven, earth, and human. Different levels of ordinary disciples would have the word heaven, earth, and human embroidered on their chest. For example, the human-level disciples would have the word human embroidered on their chest. Of course, because there were so many ordinary disciples, it was impossible for all of them to be ranked. Therefore, the 3 levels of ordinary disciples would only rank the top 200 disciples. Just like the ordinary disciples, Shao Chun also had the word 1 embroidered on his chest, But it was only a simple word, one. This meant that Xiao Chen was the first core disciple. The clothing of the core disciples was different from that of the ordinary disciples, so one could judge Xiao Chen's identity just by looking at his clothing. As for the word one embroidered on his chest, it represented Xiao Chen's ranking among the core disciples. It represented that he was the first core disciple. At first, no one noticed the word one embroidered on Xiao Chen's chest, but soon some attentive disciples saw it. For a time, many people were surprised and whispered, "This is the first core disciple. Is this senior disciple the first core disciple? No, isn't the first core disciple Brother Bai Zhong? I've seen Brother Bai Zhong before. It's not him. You guys are really ignorant. The first core disciple has been changed a long time ago. The current first core disciple is Xiao Chen, a new disciple personally appointed by the Lord. I'm sure this person is Xiao Chen. No wonder I've never seen him before. But to be able to become the first core disciple as soon as he entered Tianfeng Xingzong, he's really amazing. Fortune and misfortune. Do you think it's so easy to be the first core disciple? Let me tell you, if this Xiao Chen is not the opponent of Brother Bai Zhong, then sitting as the first core disciple is just a joke. What if he defeats Brother Bai Zhong? How stupid. Needless to say, he'll naturally be the first core disciple. Moreover, it can be said that he has created an unprecedented record. Many ordinary disciples had heard of Xiao Chen's matter. At the same time, many of them guessed that Xiao Chen's current first core disciple title was actually not legitimate. Unless Xiao Chen could defeat Bai Zhong, then he would be recognized by everyone. After all the previous first core disciples relied on their own strength to fight their way up. There had never been someone like Xiao Chen, who directly came from nowhere. Xiao Chen naturally heard the discussions of the disciples around him, but he didn't pay them any mind. He walked up to the deacon at the entrance of the earthly fire training room with a faint smile on his face and handed his identity token to him. After receiving Xiao Chen's identity token, the deacon probed it with his spirit force. After confirming Xiao Chen's identity, the deacon curiously asked, "You're Xiao Chen?" Obviously, this deacon was also very interested in Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded and replied, "Yes. That's right. You have 1 month to use the earthly fire cultivation room for free. After entering, you can use any cultivation room as long as it's empty. After entering, you only need to place your identity token in the card slot, and the cultivation room will automatically open. It will also automatically calculate the time. When you need to leave, you only need to take your identity token with you." After telling Xiao Chen how to use the earth fire cultivation room, Xiao Chen cupped his hands and thanked him. Seeing this, the deacon waved his hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. Then, he specially reminded him. Also, although the earth fire in the earth fire cultivation room has many wonderful uses, it is also abnormally domineering. You must act according to your ability when cultivating inside. If you can't endure it, don't force it. Otherwise, not only will there be no benefits, it may even damage your foundation. Especially when entering for the first time, you must be extremely careful. To Xiao Chen, the first core disciple personally appointed by the Lord, the deacon was very polite. He even specially reminded him of the things to pay attention to in the earth fire cultivation room. Hearing this, Xiao Chen cupped his hands and thanked him again. Then, he strode into the cave. Xiao Chen was genuinely curious about the renowned earthly fire training room. At the same time, he wanted to see if the legendary earthly fire was as terrifying as it was rumored to be. Walking along the cave, Xiao Chen quickly arrived at the location of the earth fire cultivation room. It was a huge underground plaza. Xiao Chen knew that this was the belly of the heavenly wind sacred mountain. The plaza was very large, and it could easily accommodate tens of thousands of people. Around the plaza, there were many secret rooms. These were the earth fire cultivation rooms. After looking around, Xiao Chen discovered that many of the cultivation rooms were already occupied. The stone doors were tightly shut, and there was a faint red glow on them. This meant that the cultivation rooms were being used. It seems that the earth-fire cultivation room is really popular. After looking around, Xiao Chen finally found an empty earth-fire cultivation room. This was the only one left. Xiao Chen did not think too much about it. He did not even look at the serial number of the cultivation room before he strode into it. Following the instructions of the deacon, Xiao Chen inserted his identity token into the card slot in the cultivation room. Instantly, the earth-fire cultivation room was opened and the stone door closed automatically. At the same time, the surrounding walls gradually turned fiery red. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all covered in a fiery red color. At the same time, the temperature in the training room was also rising rapidly. With a faint smile, Xiao Chen walked to the center of the room and sat down. Then, he closed his eyes. Gradually, strands of earth fire entered Xiao Chen's body through his pores. The earth fire was naturally processed. If the earth fire entered the body directly, even a sage-to-be expert would be burned into nothingness. Although the specially processed earth fire was still extremely violent, it was still within the tolerance range of the human body. Moreover, as the earth fire entered his body, Xiao Chen discovered that the spiritual energy in his body began to circulate automatically. Moreover, during the circulation process, the earth fire was constantly helping him to refine the spiritual energy in his body, making it purer and more condensed. This is good stuff. With just a preliminary feeling, Xiao Chen was overjoyed. This earth fire was indeed good stuff. While Xiao Chen was starting to cultivate, a lot of disciples had gathered outside Xiao Chen's cultivation room at some point in time. These disciples looked at the closed door of the cultivation room with a variety of expressions. Some looked regretful, some sneered, and some even mocked Xiao Chen. Who is this guy? How dare he enter cultivation room number 1? Doesn't he know that cultivation room number 1 is reserved for senior brother Baizhong? Chapter 580. Someone whispered. Following the voice of this ordinary disciple, one could clearly see the word 1 engraved on the door of the earth-fire cultivation room that Xiao Chen was in. This was the earth-fire cultivation room number 1. In the entire Heavenly Wind Saint sect, there were a total of 999 earthly fire cultivation rooms. Compared to the over 100,000 disciples of the Heavenly Wind Saint sect, these 999 earthly fire cultivation rooms were completely insufficient. This was also the reason why Xiao Chen could only find one earthly fire cultivation room after searching for half a day. And this was because this earth fire cultivation room number 1 belonged to Baizhong. In the past, there was a disciple who rashly entered this earth fire cultivation room number 1 and had his cultivation crippled by Baizhong. Since then, no one dared to enter this earth fire cultivation room number 1. It could be said that cultivation room 1 was Baizhong's private cultivation room. Apart from him, no one else, including the core disciples, could use it. It was for this reason that cultivation room 1 had always been empty. Otherwise, someone would have entered it a long time ago. Xiao Chen naturally didn't know about this earth fire cultivation room number 1, let alone that it was Baizhong's private cultivation room. But even if he knew, so what? Would Xiao Chen retreat? Obviously not. These earth fire cultivation rooms were first come, first serve. Moreover, others might be afraid of Baizhong, but Xiao Chen wasn't. No one knew who was cultivating inside. Many disciples gathered outside the earth fire cultivation room number 1. Following the disciples' words, the rest of the disciples began to chime in one after another. I wonder who is so reckless as to dare to use senior brother Baizhong's earth fire cultivation room number 1. No matter who it is, I think this person is dead for sure. And, at the very least, his cultivation will be crippled by senior brother Baizhong. Everyone thought that Xiao Chen was dead for sure. Inside the training room, however, Xiao Chen had nothing on his mind. He was feeling the refinement of the earthline fire. Xiao Chun was ecstatic. The earthline fire was definitely a treasure. No, it should be said that the earthline training room was definitely a treasure. As everyone knew, the earth fire cultivation room was an extremely terrifying flame. Even a semi-saint expert couldn't withstand it. Therefore, it was almost impossible to use the earth fire cultivation room number 1. No one knew what method Tianfeng Xingzong had used to achieve this. The earth fire cultivation room number 1. The earth fire cultivation room number 1. Not only did the fire have an effect on one's cultivation, but it also had a great effect on tempering one's physical body, which Xiao Chun had already experienced firsthand. Xiao Chun Battle Body Cultivation Room number 1. He felt that his tempered battle body cultivation room number 1 was constantly improving. Although the speed was very slow, it was indeed improving. This made Xiao Chun overjoyed. It was really an unexpected gain. It must be known that the tempered battle body cultivation room number 1 was very difficult. Xiao Chun Battle Body Cultivation Room number 1 was now at the golden armor level. However, he still had a long way to go before he could break through to the Jade Organs level number 2. Moreover, the amount of resources required was astronomical. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even Tianfeng Xingzong Battle Body Cultivation Room number 1 didn't have the ability to break through to the Viscera level number 2. Because it was so difficult to break through, Xiao Chun Battle Body Cultivation Room number 2 was very happy when he felt that the Earth Fire Cultivation Room number 2 was able to slowly improve his tempered Battle Body Cultivation Room number 2. Although relying on the Earth Fire Cultivation Room number 2 could only improve his tempered Battle Body Cultivation Room number 2, no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Moreover, this was already a pleasant surprise. Xiao Chun Battle Body Cultivation Room number 2 was not greedy. Xiao Chun held his breath and focused. He did not need to do anything to train in the earthly fire training room. All he needed to do was endure the tempering of the earthly fire. Of course, in the face of the tempering of the earth fire cultivation room, it was obviously unbearable for ordinary disciples. Even if the earth fire cultivation room was treated, it was still not something ordinary disciples could compete with. Therefore, the highest record for ordinary disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong Battle Body Cultivation Room was only 3 days. As for the highest record for core disciples, although it was much higher than that of ordinary disciples, it only lasted for half a month. With the passage of time, under the continuous tempering of the earth fire cultivation room number 2, the human body naturally had a limit. Because of this, even core disciples couldn't cultivate endlessly in the earth fire cultivation room number 2. However, these problems were not a problem for Xiao Chun. With the tempered battle body cultivation room number 2, the earth fire cultivation room number 2 didn't make Xiao Chun feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, it was very comfortable. The overbearing and tyrannical power of the earth fire cultivation room number 2 was like a docile sheep in Xiao Chen's body, tempering Xiao Chen's physical body and spiritual power little by little. Time passed day by day. Xiao Chun was also constantly improving in the earth fire cultivation room number 2. More than 20 days had passed, but Xiao Chun still didn't have the limit of leaving. The movement in the number 1 cultivation room number 2 naturally attracted the attention of many disciples. Originally, many disciples were waiting to watch the fun, but now more than 20 days had passed. During this period, Bai Zhong had also come, and more than once, but Xiao Chun didn't show any signs of leaving. Bai Zhong had no choice but to leave a core disciple to guard the number 1 cultivation room number 2. Once the earth fire cultivation room number 2 was opened, unless the person inside took the initiative to leave, otherwise, no one could open the secret room. A disciple wearing a core disciple costume was sitting cross-legged in front of the number 1 cultivation room number 2. This person was the person Bai Zhong had left behind to guard the number 1 cultivation room number 2. Around him, Many ordinary disciples were gathered in groups of 3 to 5. Because there were no more cultivation rooms, everyone was naturally happy to watch the fun here. Who is this person? It has been more than 20 days, and he still hasn't come out. Yes, the highest record of a core disciple is only 15 days. This person has already broken the record. I don't know who he is, but he is too strong. Yes, it has been almost a month. It is said that this matter has already alarmed the elders. After all, a disciple who can persist in the earth fire cultivation room for a month has never appeared in Tianfeng Xingzong. Even the top 10 pro-disciples have never done it. I really want to see who is the person inside the earth fire cultivation room. To be able to do this, it is simply too abnormal. Without knowing the situation, Xiao Chun had undoubtedly caused a commotion in Tianfeng Xingzong. There was no way around it. The news that someone could persist in the earth fire cultivation room for a month quickly spread throughout Tianfeng Xingzong. Countless disciples were extremely curious about this mysterious person. Some even guessed that the person in the number 1 cultivation room could not be one of the top 10 pro-disciples. Otherwise, who else could do it except for them? Not only the disciples, but also the elders of the sage sect and those half-saints had heard about this matter. All of them were extremely curious. However, due to their status, these elders of the sage sect naturally could not personally come to the earth fire cultivation room to guard the door of the earth fire cultivation room. But they still ordered the deacons in charge of the earth fire cultivation room to report the person's identity as soon as possible. Chapter 581. Unbeknownst to them, Xiao Chun had once again become the center of attention of many Tianfeng Xingzong disciples. As the news spread, more and more people gathered in front of Cultivation Room 1. Not only were there ordinary disciples, but there were also more than 10 core disciples gathered here. Among them were Yang Heng and Qin Ju, who had met Xiao Chun in the Moonless Empire. The two of them could only be considered as the weakest among the core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong. They stood guard outside Cultivation Room 1, curious as to who could actually persist in the earth fire cultivation room for an entire month. That's right, today was the day that Xiao Chun had been in Cultivation Room 1 for an entire month. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed that someone could persist in the earth fire cultivation room for an entire month. Everyone waited curiously and impatiently. They all wanted to see with their own eyes who the person who had broken the record of Tianfeng Xingzong was. At this time, someone shouted, "Senior brother Bai Zhong is here." Hearing this, the disciples took the initiative to open a path. Immediately, a gloomy Bai Zhong walked through the crowd and arrived in front of Cultivation Room 1. He looked at the core disciple who had been guarding the room and asked in a deep voice, "How is it? Still not coming out?" Hearing Bai Zhong's words, the core disciple respectfully nodded and said, "Not yet, senior brother Bai Zhong. It's been an entire month. Could it be that the people inside are the 10 core disciples? Apart from them, who else could persist for so long?" The core disciple was somewhat worried. After all, Bai Zhong had come looking for trouble. But if the people inside were the core disciples, then Bai Zhong would be finished. Facing the core disciples' worry, Bai Zhong shook his head and said, "No, the 10 core disciples wouldn't be so bored as to come to the earth fire cultivation room. They have better places to go." Bai Zhong knew a little about the 10 core disciples. He knew that it was impossible for them to appear here because the 10 core disciples had better places to cultivate. Compared to those places, the earth fire cultivation room was naturally not worth mentioning. At the mention of the 10 core disciples, Bai Zhong's eyes unconsciously flashed with anger. During this period of time, Bai Zhong was simply going crazy, and the reason was because of the 10 core disciples, He Chushuan. Originally, Bai Zhong had thought of a brilliant plan. He would use Gu Lingyao to provoke the conflict between He Chushuan and Xiao Chun, then let He Chushuan to teach Xiao Chun a lesson. Finally, Bai Zhong would take the opportunity to challenge Xiao Chun and reclaim the position of core disciple. Originally, everything was planned very well, and He Chushuan had every reason to take action. But who would have thought that when Bai Zhong's subordinate went to find He Chushuan simply ignored him and even asked him to pass a message to Bai Zhong. The message was very simple, just one sentence. Tell Bai Zhong, don't think that I don't know what he's thinking. He wants to use me to teach Xiao Chen a lesson. He's not worthy. If he doesn't want to die, tell him not to do such stupid things in the future. Otherwise, I don't mind personally throwing him out of Tianfeng Shengzong. It was such a simple sentence, but it made Bai Zhong frightened and angry. Originally, he thought that it was a foolproof plan, but unfortunately, Bai Zhong underestimated He Chushuan. Indeed, He Chushuan had taken a fancy to Gu Lingyao, but would he be used as a tool? Moreover, that person was Bai Zhong, a person who He Chushuan regarded as an ant. He underestimated the 10 core disciples too much. Even if He Chushuan was ranked last among the 10 core disciples, he was not a simple person. Therefore, it was impossible for Bai Zhong to use He Chushuan from the beginning, because He Chushuan was not an idiot. He saw through Bai Zhong's plan at a glance. Therefore, the plan to use He Chushuan to teach Xiao Chen a lesson was declared a failure. Bai Zhong was depressed about this for several days. Bai Zhong stood outside the door of cultivation room number 1 with a gloomy expression. His eyes flashed with a strong chill as he stared at cultivation room number 1. He thought to himself, no matter who you are, I'll teach you a lesson this time. Bai Zhong made up his mind to teach the person in cultivation room number 1 a lesson. Otherwise, he would lose his dignity. While Bai Zhong was deep in thought, the door to cultivation room number 1, which had remained silent for an entire month, finally opened slowly. He's out! Someone couldn't help but exclaim softly as the stone door opened slowly. It had been a month and he was finally out. As the stone door opened, Bai Zhong's body emitted a towering rage. He bellowed in a deep voice. Very good. You even dare to occupy my cultivation room. Today, I, Bai Zhong, will not, with so many people present. Bai Zhong naturally couldn't lose face. However, before he could finish his sentence, a young man in white slowly walked out of cultivation room number 1. When he saw the man's face, Bai Zhong's suspicions came to an abrupt end. He then pointed at Xiao Chen angrily and said, Xiao Chen. What? It's you, Xiao Chen. When Bai Zhong saw that the person who occupied his cultivation room number 1 was actually Xiao Chen, his expression was extremely interesting. At the same time, Xiao Chen said with a chuckle, It's me. What's the matter? Did you just say that you wouldn't do anything to me today? Xiao Chen had a mocking look on his face. In this 1 month, he had truly experienced the benefits of the earth vein fire. However, it was a pity that he had used up his 1 month of free time. Xiao Chen didn't have any glory sect contribution points on him, so he could only leave. It wasn't because he couldn't withstand the earth vein fire, but because he didn't have any glory sect contribution points. If the crowd knew about this, they would probably call him a pervert. Xiao Chen had endured for an entire month, and nothing had happened to him. Xiao Chen looked at Bai Zhong with a faint smile. Bai Zhong felt as if there was something stuck in his chest when facing Xiao Chen, and no matter how hard he tried, it would not go smoothly. Ever since Xiao Chen joined Tianfeng Shengzong, Bai Zhong's life had been a mess. Not only was his position as the number 1 core disciple evaded, but he had also sent Wang Helu to test Xiao Chen. As a result, Bai Zhong's prestige among the core disciples had dropped by a lot. He was originally filled with anger towards Xiao Chen. Now that Xiao Chen had openly occupied his cultivation room number 1, Bai Zhong naturally couldn't take it anymore. There were so many people present. If he didn't teach Xiao Chen a lesson today and chose to back down, Bai Zhong knew that his prestige would completely disappear in the future. Many people would think that he was afraid of Xiao Chen. Therefore, under the gaze of the crowd, Bai Zhong angrily pointed at Xiao Chen. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "Good, good. It's you again, Xiao Chen. Very good. I want to challenge you. Do you dare to come with me to the Battle Gate Pavilion? Today, I, Bai Zhong, will take back everything that belongs to me." Chapter 582. Bai Zhong shouted angrily. This time, he had no way out. Originally, he didn't plan to face Xiao Chen so soon. After all, Bai Zhong was very clear that Xiao Chen wasn't a simple person. Bai Zhong didn't have absolute confidence in facing him head-on. However, at this moment, Bai Zhong had no other choice. There were so many disciples present. Previously, Bai Zhong didn't know that the person in the cultivation room was Xiao Chen. Therefore, Bai Zhong wanted to teach this person a lesson. If Bai Zhong cowered now, it would undoubtedly give people the impression that he was afraid of Xiao Chen. Just think about it. Previously, he had arrogantly said that he would teach this person a lesson. However, now that he saw that the person was Xiao Chen, he cowered. What would the surrounding disciples think? Of course, Bai Zhong could choose to be shameless. However, was that possible? As the former number 1 core disciple, regardless of Bai Zhong's personality, there was no need to doubt his strength. Otherwise, the other core disciples wouldn't have been convinced by him. With such strength, Bai Zhong was naturally a proud person. Even though his means of doing things were often contemptible, it couldn't deny the pride in Bai Zhong's heart. Therefore, it was impossible for him to not care about his face. The development of the situation was a little dramatic. Because of an earth-fire cultivation room, Bai Zhong was forced to face Xiao Chen directly. Hearing Bai Zhong's angry shout, Xiao Chen didn't care at all. He smiled faintly and said, "You want to challenge me? Hee, fine. Anyway, I know that you won't give up until we fight. Let's go. I'll follow you to the Battle Gate Pavilion." Facing Bai Zhong's challenge, Xiao Chen didn't hesitate to agree. His eyes were filled with a relaxed expression. On the contrary, he didn't put Bai Zhong in his eyes. Bai Zhong gritted his teeth in anger when he saw Xiao Chen's nonchalant expression. He let out a cold snort and left without saying a word. Together with Xiao Chen, he headed toward the Battle Gate Pavilion. Bai Zhong had challenged Xiao Chen to a battle. The person who had occupied the number 1 training room for a month was actually the newly promoted top core disciple, Xiao Chen. This explosive news quickly spread like wildfire. Every disciple who heard this news knew that the battle between the new and old number 1 core disciple was finally about to begin. The result of this battle would directly determine the final fate of the number 1 core disciple. Countless disciples were looking forward to seeing whether it would be the older generations Bai Zhong suppressing Xiao Chen, or whether it would be Xiao Chen, a disciple with a mysterious mental state. Because of the battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong, Tianfeng Xingzong was completely boiling. After all, this was about determining the winner of the first core disciple. As they watched the two of them leave, Yang Heng and Chen Ju looked at each other. Then, they smiled helplessly. They had known Xiao Chen for a long time. In the past, Xiao Chen was only on par with them. But now, Xiao Chen had transformed into the number 1 core disciple of Glory Sect. He was someone who could compete with Bai Zhong. On the other hand, they were only at the bottom of the core disciples. Unknowingly, Yang Heng and Chen Ju had been completely left behind by Xiao Chen. I didn't believe it before, but now I do. Unknowingly, you can only look up to the truly monstrous geniuses in this world, Yang Heng said with a bitter smile. Hearing Yang Heng's words, Chen Ju nodded in agreement. The current him no longer had the qualifications to compete with Xiao Chen. The two of them sighed. At the same time, Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong had arrived at the Battle Gate Pavilion. As the organization responsible for the battle between Glory Sect's disciples, the Battle Gate Pavilion was one of the busiest places in Tianfeng Xingzong. Especially today's battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong, it had attracted many disciples. Before entering the Battle Gate Pavilion, Xiao Chen saw that he was surrounded by Tianfeng Xingzong disciples. With a relaxed smile on his face, he strode into the Battle Gate Pavilion with Bai Zhong. There was only one floor in the Battle Gate Pavilion. Any disciple who wanted to battle only had to register with the Battle Gate Pavilion's staff. Just as Xiao Chun and Bai Zhong entered the Battle Gate Pavilion, one of the Battle Gate Pavilion's staff came up to them and said calmly, "Follow me." Obviously, he had received the news long ago. Hearing the staff's words, Xiao Chun and Bai Zhong followed him into a room. The three of them sat facing each other. His gaze swept across Xiao Chun and Bai Zhong, and the staff spoke first. "Are the two of you sure you want to battle?" "Yes." Hearing this, Xiao Chun and Bai Zhong replied in unison. "Good, since both sides have agreed, then the result of this battle will directly determine your ranking among the core disciples. Of course, other than this, the two of you can continue to raise the stakes. Do the two of you want to raise the stakes now?" The staff continued to ask. Actually, all of this was just following the procedure. However, in more detail, the staff would take the initiative to ask Xiao Chun and Bai Zhong for their opinions. Other than ranking, they could continue to raise the stakes. Hearing the staff's words, Xiao Chun replied without hesitation. Yes. Xiao Chun still wanted to raise the stakes. Hearing this, Bai Zhong glared fiercely at Xiao Chun. Regarding this, Xiao Chun did not care at all. Instead, he looked at Bai Zhong with a smile and said, "Since we're going to battle, we naturally have to raise stakes. Senior brother Bai Zhong, how many Glory Sect contribution points do you have on you? Use them as additional stakes." Xiao Chun had his eyes on Bai Zhong's Glory Sect contribution point. After all, he was just a new disciple. He did not have a single Glory Sect contribution point on him. Therefore, he naturally would not let go of this opportunity to get rich. This Bai Zhong was an old disciple, and was once the #1 core disciple. The Glory Sect contribution points on him should not disappoint him. Sure enough, Bai Zhong did not disappoint Xiao Chun. He took out his identity token. Bai Zhong's identity token had 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points on it. Looking at the 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points on Bai Zhong's hand, Xiao Chun smiled. Bai Zhong actually had so many Glory Sect contribution points. In this way, this battle did not seem so boring. Immediately, his interest was piqued. However, at this moment, Bai Zhong's angry voice sounded. "I have 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points. Xiao Chun, what's your stake? Do you have so many Glory Sect contribution points?" "Of course I don't. However, I think my stake will not disappoint you," Xiao Chun said. Words are no proof. Take out your stake and let me see." Bai Zhong snorted coldly. "I don't have that many Glory Sect contribution points. However, if I lose, not only will the position of the #1 core disciple belong to you, but I will also be your slave for 10 years. During these 10 years, I will be at your disposal. How about that? I believe that 10 years of my time will not be less than your 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points, right?" Chapter 583. Xiao Chun was betting 10 years of his life against Bai Zhong's 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Bai Zhong's eyes lit up. Xiao Chun's bet was extremely heavy. Once Xiao Chun lost, not only would the position of the first core disciple go back to Bai Zhong, but Xiao Chun would also have to be a slave for 10 years. Of course, the reason why Xiao Chun had placed such a heavy bet was also to lure Bai Zhong. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If he wanted Bai Zhong to take out the 13,000 contribution points of the Holy Sect, how could he do it without risking anything? Furthermore, Xiao Chun did not think that he would lose, so there was no harm in it. He could not find a reason to reject Xiao Chun. In the end, Bai Zhong chose to agree and bet his 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points on Xiao Chun's 10 years of life. After confirming the wager, the two signed the letter of challenge with the help of the attendant from the Battle Gate Pavilion. This way, the two of them could be considered to have obtained the recognition of the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect. No matter what the result was, there would be no reneging on the debt. The battle was set to be tomorrow at noon. Bai Zhong handed over his 13,000 glory sect contribution points to the Battle Gate Pavilion for safekeeping. This was the rule. As for Xiao Chen, because his bet was a little strange, the Battle Gate Pavilion could not accept it. But if Xiao Chen lost, the Battle Gate Pavilion had ways to make Xiao Chen fulfill the bet. However, how could Xiao Chen lose? After signing the letter of challenge and setting the time, the two left the Battle Gate Pavilion one after the other. Just as they walked out of the Battle Gate Pavilion, Bai Zhong looked at Xiao Chen and said coldly, "Prepare to be my slave for 10 years. Then I'll have to thank you for giving me 13,000 glory sect contribution points." Hearing this, Xiao Chen said with a face full of smiles. In this regard, Xiao Chen could only say that Bai Zhong was thinking too much because Bai Zhong had no chance of winning. This was Xiao Chen's confidence. Even though Bai Zhong used to be the first core disciple, Xiao Chen was still confident that he could defeat him. Neither side was willing to give way to the other. Bai Zhong let out a cold snort when he heard Xiao Chen's words, after which, he strode away. Xiao Chen also returned to his residence. Along the way back to his residence, the news of the battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong had spread throughout the Heavenly Wind sacred sect in the shortest amount of time. Every disciple knew that Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong would be fighting on the battle stage of the Battle Gate Pavilion at noon tomorrow. Moreover, not only did the news of the battle spread, but the bet between the two was also spread. Many disciples thought that Xiao Chen was crazy when they heard that Xiao Chen was betting his 10 years of servitude with Bai Zhong. One must know that Bai Zhong only took out 13,000 glory sect contribution points. Although this was not a small number, it was nothing compared to Xiao Chen's 10 years of servitude. If Bai Zhong were to lose, he would only lose the contribution points of the sage sects at most. However, if Xiao Chen were to lose, there was no doubt that his future would be ruined. Xiao Chen would be a servant for 10 years under Bai Zhong's command. It was not hard to imagine what would happen to him. The outside world thought that Xiao Chen was crazy. However, Xiao Chen did not care about this at all. Xiao Chen, who had not had a good rest for a month, returned to his residence and asked the maids to boil a basin of hot water for him. He soaked comfortably in the wooden tub and enjoyed this rare peace. After cultivating in the earth fire cultivation room for a month, Xiao Chen was in a good mood as he soaked comfortably in the hot water. However, at this moment, Gu Lingyao rushed to the courtyard. Without knocking, Gu Lingyao directly pushed the door open and entered. Seeing Gu Lingyao, the 4 maids did not stop her. Xiao Chen had already said that Gu Lingyao could enter and leave as she pleased. Therefore, the 4 maids naturally did not stop her. "Senior Sister Gu." She bowed respectfully to Gu Lingyao. Seeing this, Gu Lingyao's face turned ugly. "What about Xiao Chen? Where is he?" "Oh, senior brother Xiao Chen is in the backyard." After learning from the maids that Xiao Chen was in the backyard, Gu Lingyao hurried to the backyard. She did not see Xiao Chen and immediately began to search the rooms one by one. It was obvious that Gu Lingyao was in a bad mood. As for why, it was obviously because of the battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. Gu Lingyao could not understand why Xiao Chen would use 10 years of his life as a servant to bet with Bai Zhong. This was simply crazy. If Xiao Chen really lost, he would be finished. Moreover, the Battle Gate Pavilion definitely had a way to make Xiao Chen fulfill the bet. Therefore, there was no way that he could go back on his word. She was a little angry, but more than that, she was worried. Finally, after pushing open the bathroom door, Gu Lingyao found Xiao Chen. Gu Lingyao didn't think much about it and said directly, "Brother Xiao, I'm sorry." "Xiao Chen, how could you be so reckless? Why did you use 10 years of your life?" Hooligan. Gu Lingyao originally wanted to ask why Xiao Chen would bet with Bai Zhong and even make such a bet. But before she could finish her sentence, Gu Lingyao screamed because Xiao Chen was standing naked in front of Gu Lingyao. Gu Lingyao's face turned red. After screaming, she turned around and ran out of the room, leaving Xiao Chen alone in the wind. Xiao Chen was about to put on his clothes, but who would have thought that Gu Lingyao would come in at this time? She didn't even knock on the door. Looking at Gu Lingyao's back, Xiao Chen said gloomily, "I'm a hooligan." Xiao Chen was a little confused, but also a little innocent. After putting on his clothes, Xiao Chen walked out of the bathroom helplessly. In the courtyard, he saw a blushing Gu Lingyao sitting on a stone bench. It was obvious that Gu Lingyao couldn't accept what happened just now. Although Xiao Chen had already put on his clothes, Gu Lingyao still blushed and scolded him when he walked over. Stinky hooligan, exhibitionist. Upon hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Xiao Chen said helplessly, "I say, Miss Gu, you were the one who rushed in, okay? I was taking a shower and you rushed in without knocking. Now you're calling me a stinky hooligan? I haven't even blamed you yet. Are you the guilty party complaining about the victim first?" As he spoke, Xiao Chen sat down opposite Gu Lingyao. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao's face turned even redder. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look at Xiao Chen. Gu Lingyao knew that she was too anxious just now. However, as a girl who had never come into contact with a man before, Gu Lingyao couldn't admit to this kind of thing. Therefore, even though she knew that it was her fault, Gu Lingyao still said in a spoiled manner, "You. Who told you to not wear clothes in broad daylight? I didn't know you were taking a shower. Big sister, have you seen anyone wearing clothes when taking a shower? Besides, don't you know how to knock on the door before entering?" Hearing Gu Lingyao's sophistry, Xiao Chen replied. Chapter 584. Xiao Chen said helplessly. However, Xiao Chen seemed to have forgotten that there were many things where reasoning with women did not exist. Therefore, Gu Lingyao shouted at the helpless Xiao Chen, "I don't care. Anyway, it's your fault. Who told you to not wear clothes?" There was no reason at all. From Gu Lingyao's words, it was all Xiao Chen's fault for not wearing clothes. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not want to be entangled in this matter. After all, he did not seem to be at a disadvantage. Xiao Chen poured himself a cup of tea and looked at Gu Lingyao. Okay. It's all my fault. Tell me, why did you come looking for me in such a hurry? What's the matter?" Xiao Chen had not seen this little girl for a month. He thought that Gu Lingyao had met with some trouble. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao finally remembered her purpose. The blush on her face faded quickly. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Chen with worry and blame. "Why did you agree to the bet with Bai Zhong? And you even used 10 years of your life as a servant as the wager. Do you know what would happen to you if you lost?" Since Xiao Chen had taken the initiative to change the topic, Gu Lingyao did not dwell on the previous awkwardness and said with a reproachful expression. Xiao Chen felt a warmth in his heart when he heard the little girl's words. It seemed that this little girl was worried about him. With a smile on his face, Xiao Chen said slowly, "Don't worry, Bai Zhong can't win against me. And if I didn't say that, would he have bet 13,000 glory sect contribution points with me? This is called no risk, no gain. Do you understand? I don't care. You're too impulsive. If you win, everything will be fine. But if you lose, it's all over. Hurry up and change the wager before it starts." Hearing Xiao Chen's explanation, Gu Lingyao said hurriedly. The moment she heard about this, she rushed over in a hurry. She wanted Xiao Chen to change the wager. After all, the battle was set for tomorrow. Xiao Chen still had the chance to change the wager. Gu Lingyao changed from her shy attitude towards Xiao Chen a few days ago. At this moment, she finally showed her coquettish side, forcing Xiao Chen to change the wager. Knowing that Gu Lingyao was doing this for his own good, Xiao Chen could not change the wager. Furthermore, facing Bai Zhong, Xiao Chen was confident. He was not willing to change the wager. Seeing this, Gu Lingyao was about to cry. "Xiao Chen, I know that you're strong. But Bai Zhong can become the #1 core disciple. He's definitely not weak. How can you be sure that you'll win against two strong opponents? No, I don't care. You have to go. Even if there's only a sliver of chance, I can't let you take the risk. Gu Lingyao was dead set on not letting Xiao Chen use her 10 years to bet with Bai Zhong. In the end, the little girl even cried. Tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Her tear-stained face made one's heart ache. He could clearly feel Gu Lingyao's concern for him. Coupled with her lovable appearance, Xiao Chen reached out and pulled Gu Lingyao into his arms, comforting her gently. Little girl, believe me. The winner of this battle will definitely be me. Don't worry, there won't be any accidents. Being pulled into Xiao Chen's bossy embrace, Gu Lingyao blushed. Hearing this, the little girl did not answer. Perhaps she did not know how to answer. Coupled with the fact that it was her first time being so close to Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao's heart was beating even faster. She was extremely nervous. Ever since she got engaged with Xiao Chen, the two of them had no intimate contact at all. Facing Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao did not know what to say. Anyway, when she was with him, Gu Lingyao couldn't help but feel nervous. But when they didn't meet, she would miss Xiao Chen a lot. She didn't know if this was considered love, but what was certain was that Gu Lingyao didn't hate Xiao Chen. In fact, she was very dependent on Xiao Chen. Nestled in Xiao Chen's arms, Gu Lingyao, who had chosen to remain silent, suddenly spoke. Xiao Chen, can I ask you a question? Yes, go ahead, Xiao Chen said. Do you like me? Will you really marry me in the future? Gu Lingyao asked. Not knowing why she asked such a question, Gu Lingyao buried her head deeper into Xiao Chen's arms. She didn't dare to look at Xiao Chen, but she was looking forward to Xiao Chen's answer. At the same time, she was somewhat nervous. Not expecting Gu Lingyao to ask such a question, Xiao Chen was slightly taken aback. He glanced at Gu Lingyao in his arms and let out a helpless, bitter smile. The current Xiao Chen was no longer the naive child who didn't know anything. After going through Qin Shuru and Flower Fairy, Xiao Chen naturally saw that Gu Lingyao had feelings for him. However, Xiao Chen didn't dare to face Gu Lingyao's feelings for him. At this moment, facing Gu Lingyao's question, Xiao Chen didn't know how to answer. It was undeniable that Gu Lingyao was very beautiful, and she was completely different from Qin Shuru and Flower Fairy. After awakening the ice god physique, Qin Shuru was an ice beauty. Other than Xiao Chen, she kept all other men at a distance. Flower Fairy, on the other hand, was as gentle as water and understood his heart very well. Compared to Qin Shuru and Flower Fairy, Gu Lingyao was a mischievous girl. Xiao Chen was very happy to be with her, but now, he didn't want to spend too much energy on relationship. His father, Qin Shuru, and Flower Fairy were still nowhere to be found. How could Xiao Chen have the heart to think about other women? Not knowing how to answer Gu Lingyao's question, Xiao Chen could only choose to remain silent. After a while, with Gu Lingyao's intelligence, she naturally guessed what Xiao Chen was thinking. She took the initiative to break free from Xiao Chen's arms and ran out of the courtyard. Xiao Chen didn't say a word. Looking at Gu Lingyao's back, Xiao Chen also knew that he had hurt her feelings. He wanted to call out to her, but in the end, he gave up. For the time being, Xiao Chen really didn't know how to face Gu Lingyao. Moreover, Xiao Chen also knew that Gu Lingyao hadn't really confirmed her thoughts. The relationship between the two of them now seemed to be shrouded in a fog. They liked each other, but didn't know how to face each other. Xiao Chen was like this, and so was Gu Lingyao. Sighing softly, Xiao Chen whispered to himself, "No matter what difficulties you face in the future, I will help you solve them." After a night of silence, he and Gu Lingyao parted on bad terms yesterday. However, Xiao Chen didn't have any good ideas about this. This morning, after stopping cultivating, Xiao Chen didn't continue cultivating. Instead, he took a good rest. Looking at the time, Xiao Chen headed towards the Battle Gate Pavilion when it was close to noon. Today was the appointed battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. This battle was Xiao Chen's first battle in Tianfeng Xingzong. At the same time, it was also a battle that he had to win. Chapter 585. The battle was finally here. Actually, since the day Xiao Chen entered Tianfeng Shengzong, the battle between him and Bai Zhong was inevitable. Unless Bai Zhong gave up the position of the first core disciple, the two of them would have to fight sooner or later. Walking out of the courtyard, the four maids in charge of serving Xiao Chen had been waiting for him since early in the morning. They also knew what was going to happen today. These four maids had served Bai Zhong before, and now they were in charge of taking care of Xiao Chen's daily needs. Although a deacon from Glory Sect had come to ask Xiao Chen if he needed to change the maids, Xiao Chen refused. In his opinion, these four maids were very good. Seeing Xiao Chen, who was dressed in white and had an indifferent expression on his face, walking toward them, the four maids said worriedly, "Senior brother Xiao Chen, we will be waiting for your return." The four maids all hoped that Xiao Chen would win. Compared to Bai Zhong, the four of them preferred Xiao Chen. Unlike Bai Zhong's arrogance, Xiao Chen had always been very friendly and approachable. He did not put on any airs and did not treat the four of them as his subordinate. This was not an act by Xiao Chen. It was his character. Xiao Chen did not like to bully the weak. Therefore, as long as the four maids completed their tasks, Xiao Chen would not care about them. Furthermore, for the past month, Xiao Chen had even given the four of them cultivation resources that he did not need to help them cultivate. Seeing the anticipation in the four of them, Xiao Chen smiled and said, "I'll be there soon." "Oh right, I want to eat phoenix chicken for lunch." Without showing any signs of nervousness, the four of them replied respectfully. Then, under the gazes of the four of them, Xiao Chen left his residence and walked towards the Battle Gate Pavilion. Today was definitely the most anticipated day in Tianfeng Shengzong. The reason was naturally the battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. The battle between the two of them would determine who the first core disciple would be. At the same time, it could be said that after the 10 core disciples, it would be the battle between the two strongest disciples in Tianfeng Shengzong. Outside the Battle Gate Pavilion, there were already many disciples gathered. There were more than 10,000 of them, and they were discussing in small groups, waiting for the battle to begin. Of course, the topic of discussion was obviously related to Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. It wasn't just the disciples. At this moment, in Tianfeng Saint's residence, He Feng and Tianfeng Saint were sitting opposite each other. A light mirror was floating in front of them, and the image on the mirror was showing the Battle Gate Pavilion. Even Tianfeng Saint and He Feng were paying attention to the battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. With a smile on their faces, He Feng asked, "Lord Saint, who do you think will win? Between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong?" "Xiao Chen," the Tianfeng Saint answered without hesitation in response to He Feng's question. He Feng was full of confidence in Xiao Chen. Hearing this, He Feng asked curiously, "Lord Saint, you are very confident in Xiao Chen. However, Bai Zhong is not weak either. If Xiao Chen wants to defeat him, it won't be easy." "You are thinking too much. Xiao Chen's strength has already reached the level of a pro-disciple. Although he has only just stepped into this level, it is enough to defeat Bai Zhong. Furthermore, if Xiao Chen is weaker than Bai Zhong, it can only be said that there is something wrong with my judgment," Tianfeng Saint said. Since the start of the Glory Sect selection, Tianfeng Saint had been paying attention to Xiao Chen. He was sure that Xiao Chen's combat strength had already reached the level of a pro-disciple. Although there was still a gap between him and a true pro-disciple, he was definitely not someone that King Jiao could compete with. Therefore, Tianfeng Saint was confident that Xiao Chen would win the battle between Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. He was full of confidence in Xiao Chen. At the same time, the other elders and deacons of Glory Sect were also paying attention to this battle from different places. Of course, they were more interested in Xiao Chen. After all, Xiao Chen was a new disciple and had caught the eye of the ultimate god. All the elders wanted to see for themselves how extraordinary Xiao Chen was. More and more people gathered outside the Battle Gate Pavilion. For today's battle, the Battle Gate Pavilion had made an exception and opened up the first battle platform. There were a total of 10 battle platforms in the Battle Gate Pavilion. The first battle platform could be said to be the largest and the most sturdy one. Around the huge battle platform, there was a saint-level charm formation to protect it from the shockwaves of the battle. It was rumored that the first battle platform could not be destroyed even if 2 half-saints fought fiercely. The Battle Gate Pavilion had not opened up the first battle platform for a long time. However, today, for Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong, the Battle Gate Pavilion had made an exception and opened up the first battle platform. This showed how important this battle was to them. Time slowly passed. The time for Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong's battle was getting closer and closer. Everyone was gradually looking forward to it. While the disciples were waiting for Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong to appear, a commotion suddenly broke out in the crowd. Someone cried out in alarm. "Look, isn't that senior brother Yu Qing and senior brother He Chushuan? Even they are here." The 2 personal disciples, Yu Qing and He Chushuan, had arrived. Following the exclamations, 2 young men wearing heavenly wind robes walked over together. They were Yu Qing and He Chushuan. The 10 personal disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong had their own special robes called the Heavenly Wind Robe. This robe was not only a symbol of status, but also a top-grade defensive heavenly weapon. The wide robe extended all the way to their ankles. Wearing it made them look very dashing. When the wind blew, the robes fluttered. It made Yu Qing and He Chushuan look like proud sons of the heavens. People couldn't help but look askance at them. The crowd automatically opened up a path for the 2 of them. Yu Qing smiled faintly and said, "Seems like they haven't arrived yet. Sigh, they're early." "Isn't it because you've been rushing them?" "Great, now they're early," He Chushuan said grumpily. "Haha, I was just a little excited. Besides, wouldn't I be able to get a good seat if I came a little earlier?" Yu Qing didn't care about He Chushuan's displeasure and laughed loudly. "Do you think you still need to get a seat?" He Chushuan said helplessly. Even 2 of the 10 personal disciples had come. This way, Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong's battle could be said to be the center of attention. Not long after Yu Qing and He Chushuan arrived, Bai Zhong arrived at the Battle Gate Pavilion accompanied by a group of core disciples. With his arrival, the crowd was completely excited. The battle between the number 1 core disciples was finally about to begin. Bai Zhong walked to the first battle platform like a moon surrounded by stars. However, when he saw Yu Qing and He Chushuan, he didn't hesitate and immediately ran over to them. Chapter 586. Senior brother Yu, senior brother He, you're here too, Bai Zhong said with a flattering smile as he ran over to Yu Qing and He Chushuan. Bai Zhong had always been overbearing in front of others, but he didn't dare to put on airs in front of the 10 direct disciples. His attitude couldn't be any lower. Many people had thought that since Bai Zhong was already the first core disciple, then he shouldn't be too far away from becoming one of the top 10 pro-disciples. However, only Bai Zhong knew that the gap between him and the top 10 pro-disciples could be described as the distance between heaven and earth. It wouldn't be an exaggeration. There was once when Bai Zhong and He Chushuan sparred. He Chushuan defeated Bai Zhong in one move. After that, Bai Zhong understood that even though he was the first core disciple, he was nothing in front of the 10 direct disciples. Therefore, Bai Zhong was very respectful to the 10 direct disciples. He Chushuan ignored Bai Zhong's flattering smile. On the other hand, Yu Qing smiled and said without any arrogance, "Haha, we're just here to watch the show. Today's battle will determine who the first core disciple belongs to. Junior brother Bai Zhong, you have to work hard." Yes, I won't let senior brother Yu Qing down," Bai Zhong replied with a smile. He was just being polite. Yu Qing naturally didn't want Bai Zhong to win. In other words, to Yu Qing, no matter who won or lost, it didn't affect him. The reason he came was because he had too much free time. During this period of time, Yu Qing didn't have any missions that required him to go out. He cultivated step by step every day and had nothing to do at other times. Therefore, he came here to watch. After chatting for a while, Bai Zhong tactfully left and stepped onto the first battle platform alone. He returned to his previous dignified appearance and quietly waited for Xiao Chen's arrival. He didn't have to wait for long. After about 10 minutes, Xiao Chen arrived at the battle gate pavilion alone. As soon as he appeared, the surrounding disciples became restless. Xiao Chen's arrival meant that the battle was about to begin. He took the initiative to open up a path for Xiao Chen and calmly stepped onto the first platform, facing Bai Zhong. As Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong arrived on the battle platform, an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion appeared on the platform. This old man was an elder of Tianfeng Xingzong. He was a half-step saint and was also the pavilion lord of the Battle Gate Pavilion. The fact that he personally appeared to preside over this battle showed how high the standard of this battle was. The old man glanced at Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong calmly. Then, he said, "Is there anything you two need to change about this battle? Or you can give up?" "No," Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong replied in unison. "All right, let's begin then." Seeing that the two of them had no intention of changing or going back on their words, the old man announced the start of the match. As the sound of his voice faded, the old man took the initiative to leave the first platform and soared into the air, leaving the platform to Xiao Chen and Bai Zhong. When the battle began, the two of them looked at each other. Bai Zhong was the first to erupt with a soaring aura. His cultivation was at the initial Dao confirmation realm and was infinitely close to the initial Dao confirmation realm. Feeling the terrifying aura from Bai Zhong, Xiao Chen also released an aura that wasn't any weaker than Bai Zhong's. Their auras collided with each other. Judging from their auras alone, it was impossible to determine who was stronger and who was weaker. There was a hint of coldness in their eyes. Bai Zhong was the first to make a move. He struck out with his palm, and a giant palm condensed from spiritual energy came crashing down on Xiao Chen. Heaven-level lower martial skill, heavy mountain palm. Senior brother Bai Zhong really didn't show any mercy. He actually used the heavy mountain palm as soon as he attacked. Without the slightest intention of probing, Bai Zhong immediately used the heavy mountain palm. Upon seeing this, many disciples softly exclaimed in surprise. No one had expected that Bai Zhong would actually use a Tian-class martial skill when the battle had just begun. Facing Bai Zhong's multiple mountain palms, Xiao Chen's storage ring flashed with a bright light. The black dragon sword appeared in his hand, and his sword intent soared to the sky. Xiao Chen immediately slashed out with his sword, using the triple wave stacking technique. Senior brother Bai Zhong, it seems that you have mastered a lot of heaven-level martial skills. Today, let me teach you a lesson. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Mastering a lot of heaven-level martial skills doesn't necessarily mean that it will be good. If you don't master it, it will bring shame to the name of heaven-level martial skills. Xiao Chen said plainly as the sword edge and the palm print clashed. Bai Zhong had used a heaven-level lower martial skill, while Xiao Chen had only used a earth-level upper martial skill. However, Bai Zhong's heavy mountain palm had only reached the proficient realm. He hadn't even reached the perfection realm. On the other hand, although Xiao Chen's 3 layers of waves was only a earth-level upper martial skill, Xiao Chen had already cultivated it to the perfection realm. Therefore, when the two collided, Xiao Chen's 3 layers of waves was actually not inferior to Bai Zhong's heavy mountain palm. One was a low-grade heaven-level martial arts technique, while the other was a high-grade earth-level martial arts technique. Logically speaking, Xiao Chen's 3 layers of overlapping waves should not be a match for the mountainous palm. However, it was proven that in front of a high-grade earth-level martial arts technique, the mountainous palm, which was only in the proficient realm, could not gain any advantage at all. Just as Xiao Chen had said, Bai Zhong had mastered quite a number of heaven-level martial skills. There were a total of 5 of them. These were also the skills that he had learned over the years using his status as the first core disciple. Previously, whenever the sage sect had a reward, Bai Zhong would choose the heaven-level martial skill without hesitation. However, just as Xiao Chun had said, Bai Zhong had mastered so many heaven-level martial skills, but he hadn't cultivated any of them to the perfection realm. Mixed but not refined. Using these words to describe Bai Zhong was not wrong. The power of a heaven-level martial skill naturally didn't need to be stubborn. However, if one wasn't proficient in it, the true power of a heaven-level martial skill wouldn't be able to be unleashed. Just like now, Xiao Chun had only used 3 layers of waves to block Bai Zhong's heavy mountain palm. This was the most direct proof. A heaven-level lower martial skill at the perfection realm was actually not stronger than a earth-level upper martial skill at the perfection realm. The sword edge and the palm print collided violently and then cancelled each other out. Seeing that Xiao Chun had easily blocked Bai Zhong's attack, Yu Qing, who was below the stage, smiled faintly. This junior brother Xiao Chun is quite interesting. Previously, I also heard some things about Bai Zhong. This person placed too much emphasis on heaven-level martial skills, so he learned all of them. However, he didn't know that learning so many heaven-level martial skills would actually be of little use. They were mixed but not refined. He simply couldn't unleash the true power of a heaven-level martial skill. Yu Qing agreed with Xiao Chen's words. Instead of splitting his energy on different heaven-level martial skills, it was better to focus on one heaven-level martial skill. If he could successfully reach the perfection realm, he would definitely be much stronger than Bai Zhong. Chapter 587. The power of multiple heaven-class martial skills at the mastery stage was obviously inferior to a single heaven-class martial skill at the perfection stage. This was without a doubt. Rather than splitting his limited energy on multiple heaven-class martial skills, he might as well focus on cultivating one heaven-class martial skill. In this way, even if he cultivated it to the perfection stage, his power would definitely be stronger than Bai Zhong's. It could be said that Bai Zhong had made a huge mistake in choosing a martial skill. Of course, Bai Zhong wasn't the only one who had made this mistake. Many cultivators had made the same mistake. After all, a heaven-class martial skill was so tempting that it was hard to resist it. This was also the reason why Xiao Chen hadn't gone to the martial skill pavilion to exchange for a heaven-class martial skill. Bai Zhong was naturally infuriated that Xiao Chen had used a superior earth-class martial skill to block Bai Zhong's heaven-class martial skill. In addition to Xiao Chen's words, Bai Zhong shouted coldly, "Humph, what nonsense! I want to see if your strength is as good as your mouth." It was impossible for Bai Zhong to admit that he was wrong. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Zhong moved his feet and executed a superior heaven-class martial skill. However, as expected, Bai Zhong's comprehension of this martial skill was still at the mastery stage. On the other hand, Xiao Chen also executed the stampede of the fierce tiger. However, unlike Bai Zhong, Xiao Chen had already cultivated the stampede of the fierce tiger to the perfection stage. His speed was obviously much faster than Bai Zhong's. Both of them executed their own martial skills. However, relying on a deeper understanding of the stampede of the fierce tiger, Xiao Chen clearly had an absolute advantage in terms of speed. Between martial skills of the same grade, one was at the mastery stage while the other was at the perfection stage. It was obvious at a glance which one was stronger and which one was weaker. On the battle stage, the two of them fought fiercely. However, it wasn't hard to see that Xiao Chen clearly had the upper hand in the battle. In the crowd, Gu Lingyao and a young lady stood side by side. Although they had parted on bad terms yesterday with Xiao Chen, and Xiao Chen's silence had made Gu Lingyao very sad, Gu Lingyao still personally came to watch Xiao Chen's battle today. "Lingyao, it seems like your sweetheart is going to win this battle," the young lady beside Gu Lingyao said with a smile as she watched the battle on the battle stage. The young lady's name was Wang Fang. Like Gu Lingyao, she was a core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. During the time Gu Lingyao had joined the Tianjin Tianfeng Xingzong, the two of them had gradually become close due to their dissimilar. It could be said that Wang Fang could be considered Gu Lingyao's best friend in Tianfeng Xingzong. Because of this, Wang Fang also knew a lot of Gu Lingyao's secrets, including the matter of her liking for Xiao Chen. Hearing Wang Fang's words, Gu Lingyao blushed and said shyly, "Who said he's my sweetheart? Don't talk nonsense, there's nothing between us." She had never admitted that she liked Xiao Chen, but how could Gu Lingyao's various actions hide from Wang Fang? The usually mischievous Gu Lingyao would blush as soon as Xiao Chen was mentioned. Wasn't this liking? Seeing Gu Lingyao's shy expression, Wang Fang didn't tease her anymore. Her expression changed and she said seriously, "Lingyao, I think that since you like him, why don't you take the initiative to say it? Since Junior Xiao Chen isn't taking the initiative, why don't you take the initiative? Don't regret it when the time comes," Wang Fang said seriously to Gu Lingyao. After spending some time together, Wang Fang had a rough understanding of the relationship between Gu Lingyao and Xiao Chen. To put it simply, these two people were too passive. They never took the initiative to look for each other, let alone speak their hearts out. Especially Gu Lingyao. She obviously liked Xiao Chen, but she didn't admit it and didn't take any practical actions. Hearing Wang Fang's words, Gu Lingyao didn't respond and chose to remain silent. Yesterday, Xiao Chen's silence had indeed made Gu Lingyao sad for a long time. This was the first time Gu Lingyao felt this way. She didn't know if this was liking. She didn't know what Gu Lingyao was thinking. Seeing this, Wang Fang didn't say anything else and turned to continue watching the battle on the stage. Both sides had already exchanged hundreds of moves. Relying on his deeper understanding of the tiger's stampede, Xiao Chen had completely taken the initiative. Bai Zhong couldn't keep up with Xiao Chen's speed at all. He could only passively take a beating. Many wounds had already appeared on his body. Although he didn't say it out loud, in his heart, Bai Zhong had to admit that in terms of speed, he was inferior to Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen relied on his speed to dodge Bai Zhong's attacks again. With a flash, he circled behind Bai Zhong and slashed out with his sword. I've already said it before. Is there any use in cultivating so many heaven-level martial skills? It's just a superficial skill, Xiao Chen said indifferently after injuring Bai Zhong once again. That's right. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Bai Zhong's face turned completely gloomy. He gritted his teeth and said, "Xiao Chen, I'm going to kill you." As he spoke, a surge of blood qi erupted from Bai Zhong's body. This blood qi was so dense that it wasn't any weaker than a Dao Gate realm martial artist. Along with the appearance of this blood qi, the wounds on Bai Zhong's body healed at a visible speed. His body that was originally dripping with blood recovered to its original state in just a dozen breaths. Such a rapid healing ability was indeed breathtaking. Seeing this scene, Xiao Chen's eyes revealed a hint of interest as he thought to himself. This is the strength that the number one core disciple should have. But this blood qi, is Bai Zhong a body refinement martial artist? Facing such a rapid healing ability, Xiao Chen admitted that he couldn't do it. Even the tempered battle body couldn't do it. After all, the tempered battle body's forte wasn't healing. He guessed that Bai Zhong must have cultivated a profound body refinement cultivation technique to be able to reach this stage. Xiao Chen's guess was right. Bai Zhong had indeed cultivated a body refinement cultivation technique. This body refinement cultivation technique could be said to be Bai Zhong's true trump card. Bai Zhong relied on this body refinement cultivation technique to become the number one core disciple. It was called the Greenwood Body. It was a saint-class lower-level body refinement cultivation technique. Its most powerful aspect was its self-healing ability. After his injuries healed, his aura returned to its peak. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Xiao Chen. Bai Zhong shouted coldly, "Xiao Chen, I have the Greenwood Body. You can't kill me." At this moment, Bai Zhong's dejected demeanor was replaced with an awe-inspiring aura. Looking at Bai Zhong, who seemed to have been reborn, Yu Qing, who was below the stage, smiled. The green wood body. This must be what Bai Zhong relied on to become famous. It's rumored that the greenwood body is a saint-class lower-level body refinement cultivation technique of the ancient saint sect. But it's a pity that Bai Zhong didn't obtain the complete cultivation method of the greenwood body. The greenwood body he cultivated is only half-baked. Chapter 588. The greenwood body was a lower sacred-level body refining technique from the ancient sage sect. As one of the top 10 prodisciples, Yu Qing was naturally familiar with the greenwood body. Originally, Yu Qing was fully qualified to cultivate the greenwood body. Unfortunately, he didn't want it because the greenwood body of the Heavenly Wind sacred sect was given to him by the ancient sacred sect. It wasn't complete and only had the cultivation technique of the first level. Therefore, even if he cultivated it, he wouldn't be able to achieve much. An incomplete cultivation technique, no matter how strong it was useless. Therefore, not only Yu Qing, but also the top 10 prodisciples did not practice the greenwood body. Different from the top 10 prodisciples, Bai Zhong had already started cultivating the greenwood body several years ago. This was naturally bestowed to him by the Glory sect. Bai Zhong remembered that when he had just obtained the first cultivation method of the greenwood body, he was very excited for a long time. Although it was incomplete, no matter what, the greenwood body was still a saint-level cultivation method. Yu Qing and He Chushuan scoffed at Bai Zhong's display of the greenwood body. At the same time, after hearing Bai Zhong's words, Xiaochen smiled and said, "That's right, Bai Zhong. Instant self-healing? But I believe that everything has a limit. Your self-healing ability is indeed abnormal, but I'm curious. How many times can you use this self-healing ability?" Similarly, Xiao Chen did not panic at all. He was more curious about Bai Zhong's greenwood body. He did not believe that Bai Zhong could use this instantaneous self-healing ability continuously. There must be a limit. As long as this limit was broken, Bai Zhong would naturally be defeated. Hearing Xiao Chen's indifferent words, the smile on Bai Zhong's face instantly disappeared. Indeed, Xiao Chen was right. The self-healing ability of the greenwood body was very abnormal, but there was indeed a limit to it. Especially for someone like Bai Zhong, who had only practiced the first level of the greenwood body, there were even more limitations if he wanted to use the abnormal self-healing ability of the greenwood body. First of all, the number of times he could heal himself was 3 times at most. At the same time, it also depended on the severity of the injury. If the injury was too severe, Bai Zhong would not be able to heal himself instantly. There were strict restrictions on the number of times and the degree of injury. This was also the reason why the top 10 prodisciples did not choose to cultivate the greenwood body. The restrictions were too strict. In the eyes of the Qingchuan disciples of the National Normal University, it was a useless thing. There was no need to waste time. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the smile on Bai Zhong's face disappeared. At the same time, Xiao Chen's body emitted a faint golden light. As time passed, the golden light became denser and denser. Since Bai Zhong had already used the greenwood body, Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't hold back. As the golden light appeared, Xiao Chen's vital energy, which wasn't any weaker than Bai Zhong's, soared into the sky. Like Bai Zhong, Xiao Chen had only cultivated the first level of the golden armor realm. However, in terms of grade, the 100 refined battle body completely crushed Bai Zhong's greenwood body. Although the 100 refined battle body didn't have an abnormal self-healing ability like the greenwood body, did this mean that it was inferior to the greenwood body? Obviously not. The 100 refined battle body didn't pursue a fast self-healing ability, but immortality. Since it could achieve immortality, the 100 refined battle body naturally didn't pursue a useless self-healing ability. Immortality was what the 100 refined battle body pursued. The golden light enveloped Xiao Qin as if a demon god had descended. Looking at Bai Zhong, Xiao Qin smiled and said, "Senior brother Bai Zhong, I'm coming." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Qin took a step forward and disappeared from where he was. Then, he appeared in front of Bai Zhong out of thin air and punched out fiercely. A sonic boom was heard. Facing this punch, Bai Zhong's expression changed instantly. He didn't need to experience it personally. Just by feeling it, Bai Zhong knew that Xiao Qin's seemingly simple punch contained terrifying power. Without hesitation, Bai Zhong chose to dodge. He didn't dare to take Xiao Qin's punch head-on. Seeing this, Xiao Qin naturally wouldn't give Bai Zhong the slightest chance. He leaped forward and launched a fierce attack. Both of them were body-refining martial artists, and both of them had cultivated extraordinary body-refining cultivation method. But at this moment, after both of them had revealed their trump cards, what was surprising was that Bai Zhong was not only unable to recover some lost ground, but had instead fallen into an even more disadvantageous position. Not only in terms of speed, but also in terms of strength and physique, Bai Zhong was completely at a disadvantage. The first level of the Greenwood body did not increase Bai Zhong's strength by much. It only gave Bai Zhong a terrifying self-healing ability. On the other hand, Xiao Qin was different. After the tempered battle body was put to use, Xiao Qin was like a ferocious beast in human form. His physical body and strength were far beyond that of demonic beasts of the same level. He completely crushed Bai Zhong in all aspects. At this time, Bai Zhong's only advantage was his terrifying self-healing ability. However, as Xiao Qin said, even though the self-healing ability of the azure wood body was extraordinary, how many times could he self-heal? If the first time didn't work, then the second time. If the second time didn't work, then the third time. There was bound to be a time when Bai Zhong couldn't self-heal. Yu Qing had completely gained the upper hand. His attacks were like a storm pressing down on Bai Zhong. Seeing the one-sided situation on the battle stage, Yu Qing's eyes flashed with surprise for the first time. He looked at Xiao Qin on the battle stage with great interest. At this time, Yu Qing was finally interested in Xiao Qin. This new first core disciple really surprised him. The body-refining cultivation technique that junior brother Xiao Qin has mastered doesn't seem to be inferior to the azure wood body. Is it also a sacred level body-refining cultivation technique? Bai Zhong was very curious about the 100 refined battle body displayed by Xiao Qin. It could completely suppress the azure wood body, which showed how powerful the 100 refined battle body was. Hearing Yu Qing's words, He Chushuan said calmly, "Don't forget that the azure wood body that Bai Zhong has cultivated is only the first level. So, Xiao Qin only needs to cultivate an upper heaven level body refining cultivation technique to suppress the azure wood body." He Chushuan didn't believe that Xiao Qin's 100 refined battle body was a sacred level cultivation technique. After all, in the entire Tianhe continent, there were only a few sacred level cultivation techniques. Even Tianfeng Shengzong didn't have one. Only the true overlords of the Tianhe continent, like the ancient sacred sect, could have such a precious treasure. Regardless of whether it is true or not, after this battle, the position of the top core disciple will most likely belong to junior brother Xiao Qin. Yu Qing did not argue with He Chushuan's words. The battle was still ongoing, but Yu Qing could already decide the final outcome. After speaking, Yu Qing turned around and walked out of the battle gate pavilion. Upon seeing this, He Chushuan also stepped forward and followed. A smile hung on the corner of his mouth as he spoke. "Senior brother, you don't want to continue watching." Chapter 589. Before the battle ended, Yu Qing chose to leave. He Chushuan followed behind him and asked, "Senior brother, are you not going to continue watching?" Hearing He Chushuan's words, Yu Qing still had a faint smile on his face. The outcome has been decided. What else is there to watch? It's a good thing for Glory Sect to have a change in the number 1 core disciple. Perhaps this is the real intention of the Lord Saint. Senior brother, you don't think Bai Zhong will win? He Chushuan laughed. What do you think? Yu Qing did not answer. He already knew the outcome. At the same time, Yu Qing was actually supportive of the change in the number 1 core disciple. Compared to Bai Zhong, Yu Qing favored Xiaochen more. Not only because of their strength, but also because of the difference in temperament and character. Bai Zhong was vengeful and ambitious. At the same time, he used his strength to bully the weak. In front of the top 10 pro-disciples, Bai Zhong bowed to them. In front of the core disciples and pro-disciples, Bai Zhong was extremely overbearing. Such a person was really not suitable to be the number 1 core disciple. Not long after Yu Qing and He Chushuan left, Bai Zhong used the self-healing ability of the Greenwood body for the second time. His injuries were healed. However, this self-healing ability could not change anything in front of Xiaochen. His expression did not change at all. His attacks did not stop at all. He continued to attack Bai Zhong fiercely. In the face of Xiaochen's terrifying attacks, Bai Zhong used the self-healing ability of the Greenwood body again. At this point, Bai Zhong had used the self-healing ability 3 times. Bai Zhong's face turned ugly. He knew that he no longer had the ability to heal instantly. 3 times was already his limit. If he was injured again, he would really be finished. Bai Zhong's mood was very heavy as he blocked Xiaochen's attacks. Without the ability to heal himself, he was no match for Xiaochen. After fighting for so long, Bai Zhong could be said to have used all his means. He had already displayed the few heaven-level martial skills that he had mastered, but they were unable to do anything to Xiaochen. It was true that Bai Zhong had grasped many heaven-class martial skills, but he wasn't proficient in any of them. This was Bai Zhong's greatest weakness. Facing a heaven-class martial skill that was proficient in the proficient realm, Xiaochen had too many ways to deal with it. Whether he chose to dodge or take it head-on, it wouldn't be a problem. Bai Zhong couldn't do anything to Xiaochen. His speed, strength, and physical body were all inferior to Xiaochen's. The more they fought, the more frightened he became. Finally, Bai Zhong couldn't help but ask, Xiaochen, let's call this battle a draw. How about we stop here? In the future, you will be the number 1 core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, and I will absolutely not come to find trouble with you. Bai Zhong used spiritual power to transmit his words, so only Xiaochen could hear him. At this point, Bai Zhong knew that he had no hope of winning, so he chose to beg for mercy and call it a draw. This way, he could still save some of his face. However, would Xiaochen agree? Hearing this, Xiaochen's face revealed a smile. It seems that your self-healing ability has reached its limit, right? Bai Zhong took the initiative to beg for mercy, but Xiaochen didn't care at all. However, he guessed that Bai Zhong was probably at his wit's end. Otherwise, why would he be so humble? Facing Xiaochen's guess, Bai Zhong's face became more and more ugly. Seeing this, Xiaochen's guess became more and more certain. His smile became even brighter as he said, "It seems that it's true. In that case, you lose. Make peace? Call it a draw?" This was naturally impossible. To put it bluntly, what right did Bai Zhong have to make peace with him? Moreover, Xiaochen wouldn't do such a thing at all. Xiaochen's attacks became more and more ferocious. Bai Zhong, who was already difficult to resist, was now under even more pressure. Soon, his chest was pierced by Xiaochen's sword. Then, Xiaochen kicked out and sent Bai Zhong flying. Bai Zhong fell heavily to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. Before Bai Zhong could stand up, Xiaochen's ink dragon sword was already at his throat. Looking down at Bai Zhong, Xiaochen said indifferently, "You've lost." Lost. Bai Zhong had indeed lost. After using all his means, Bai Zhong was still defeated by Xiaochen. Bai Zhong gritted his teeth and stared at Xiaochen without saying a word. Bai Zhong didn't blame Xiaochen for his loss today, but he was unwilling to accept it in his heart. Lost. Senior brother Bai Zhong actually lost. Oh my God, what kind of body refinement technique did senior brother, Xiao Chen, cultivate. Even senior brother Bai Zhong's azure wood body wasn't a match for him. Seeing the outcome of the battle on the stage, many disciples below the stage began to whisper among themselves. The disciples were naturally most surprised by Xiao Chen's 100 refined battle body. Even Bai Zhong's azure wood body wasn't a match for him. It could even be said that in terms of body refinement techniques, Xiao Chen completely crushed Bai Zhong. The 100 refined battle body completely crushed the azure wood body. Of course, this didn't mean that the azure wood body was trash. A low-grade saint-level body refinement technique naturally wouldn't be trash. It could even be said that the azure wood body was abnormal because of its terrifying self-healing ability. This alone was enough to drive countless people crazy. However, compared to the azure wood body, the 100 refined battle body was obviously more heaven-defying. The azure wood body pursued a heaven-defying self-healing ability, while the 100 refined battle body pursued immortality. Based on this point alone, the 100 refined battle body had already surpassed the azure wood body by a few hundred street. After successfully defeating Bai Zhong, the white-haired elder from before reappeared on the battle stage. He looked at Xiao Chen with a surprised expression and announced loudly, "Xiao Chen, you have won. Xiao Chen wins this battle." Upon hearing the announcement, the disciples below burst into cheers. Although many of the disciples present weren't familiar with Xiao Chen, they were completely convinced by Xiao Chen after this battle. Previously, many disciples were dissatisfied with Xiao Chen's sudden appearance as the #1 core disciple. However, after this battle, Xiao Chen used his own strength to prove that he didn't rely on luck to become the #1 core disciple, but true strength. He used his strength to prove himself, and at the same time, he convinced many of the disciples present. At this moment, Xiao Chen's position as the #1 core disciple was truly acknowledged by everyone. Like the crowd, Gu Lingyao was also cheering in the crowd. Gu Lingyao hugged Wang Feng and shouted happily. "He won, he won. Wang Feng, did you see that? Xiao Chen won. Good, good, good. I know that Xiao Chen won. However, Miss Gu, can you let go of me first? If this goes on, I will be strangled to death by you." Facing the excited Gu Lingyao, Wang Feng said snappily. At this moment, Gu Lingyao was hugging her tightly, and his hands were naturally wrapped around Wang Feng's neck. Because he was hugging her too tightly, Wang Feng felt that it was a little difficult to breathe. Hearing Wang Feng's words, Gu Lingyao realized that he had lost his composure and let go of Wang Feng with a red face. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 590. Gu Lingyao was embarrassed by Wang Feng's words. When she saw Xiao Chen win, she was really happy. At the same time, her heart that had been in her throat all this time was finally put down. "Miss Gu, you've changed too much. It's really hard for me to accept," Wang Feng said with a bitter smile. Gu Lingyao was so excited just a moment ago, but now she was blushing and silent. However, Wang Feng had already experienced Gu Lingyao's behavior. As long as it involved Xiao Chen, Gu Lingyao would be like this. It was as if she had turned into a different person. She was no longer her usual mischievous self. Wang Feng held Gu Lingyao's hand and said softly, "Lingyao, you can't go on like this. There are some things that you have to face. Do you really want to drag things out with Xiao Chen?" Wang Feng knew that Gu Lingyao liked Xiao Chen. She also knew that the little girl was shy and didn't dare to say anything. However, she couldn't go on like this. Since she liked him, according to Wang Feng's personality, she would naturally take the initiative to fight for him. However, after hearing Wang Feng's advice, Gu Lingyao's face turned even redder. She lowered her head and said shyly, I'm not ready yet." After saying that, Gu Lingyao turned around and ran away. Looking at the little girl's back, Wang Feng shook her head helplessly. "This little girl. Sigh, forget it. Let me help you. If this continues, who knows how long it will take for the two of you to drag things out." Wang Fong could tell that Gu Lingyao wouldn't confess her love for Xiao Chen. Since that was the case, she could only let her friend do the talking. She turned around and walked towards Xiao Chen. At this moment, Xiao Chen stepped down from the battle platform after receiving 13,000 contribution points from Bai Zhong. The outcome of the battle had been decided. As for Bai Zhong, Xiao Chen naturally did not care. It did not matter whether Bai Zhong hated him or not. Even if Bai Zhong wanted to take revenge on him, Xiao Chen did not care. If he could defeat him once, Xiao Chen could defeat him again. Moreover, today was in the sect. Xiao Chen obviously couldn't kill Bai Zhong. Otherwise, the elders of the Glory sect wouldn't sit idly by. Therefore, Bai Zhong could be said to have escaped death today. However, if he didn't cherish it and wanted to provoke Xiao Chen wouldn't mind making him disappear completely. There was no joy on his face at all. In Xiao Chen's eyes, defeating Bai Zhong was a matter of course. There was nothing to be happy about. Of course, the 13,000 Glory Sect contribution points made Xiao Chen secretly happy. With this amount of Glory Sect contribution points, he wouldn't be so poor anymore. The battle was over. Xiao Chen prepared to return to his residence. Passing through the crowd, Xiao Chen slowly left the Battle Gate Pavilion under the gazes of many disciples. However, just as Xiao Chen left the Battle Gate Pavilion, a pretty girl blocked his path. Wearing the uniform of a core disciple, the girl was clearly a core disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. She was none other than Gu Lingyao's good friend, Wang Fong. She had been waiting for Xiao Chen here. This was the path that Xiao Chen had to pass through to return to his residence. There was no one else here, so it was a good place to talk. What's the matter? Not knowing who Wang Fong was, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. Seeing that Xiao Chen didn't show any mercy towards her, Wang Fong could even see a trace of impatience in Xiao Chen's eyes. She thought to herself, this guy is really a block of wood. No wonder junior sister Lingyao is like this. Wang Fong secretly cursed Xiao Chen for being a block of wood. However, she quickly adjusted her attitude and smiled. Senior brother Xiao Chen, my name is Wang Fong. I'm junior sister Gu Lingyao's friend. I've been waiting here because I have something to tell you. It's about Gu Lingyao. Although she was dissatisfied with Xiao Chen's attitude towards her, Wang Fong still smiled and took the initiative to explain her intentions. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change as he replied, "What's the matter?" "It's nothing. Junior sister Lingyao just wants me to congratulate senior brother Xiao Chen. Senior brother also knows that junior sister Lingyao's face is thin. There are some things that she can't say. After learning that senior brother has won, junior sister wants to invite senior brother for a drink to congratulate senior brother. I hope senior brother will accept." Wang Fong invited Xiao Chen for a gathering. Of course, Gu Lingyao didn't say these words, but Xiao Chen didn't know. Hearing this, Xiao Chen thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, tell Lingyao that I'll definitely go." Although he didn't know why Gu Lingyao wanted to invite him, Xiao Chen didn't have any reason to refuse. Yesterday, he had already hurt Gu Lingyao's heart. Today, the little girl took the initiative to invite him. If Xiao Chen refused, then it would be somewhat unreasonable. Moreover, although Xiao Chen didn't want to think about personal relationships, he didn't need to hide from Gu Lingyao. Very straightforwardly agreed. Seeing this, Wang Fong's heart was overjoyed. She immediately smiled and said, "Good, then we respectfully welcome senior brother's arrival." "Oh, that's right, junior sister Lingyao's residence is at the 128th Core Disciple Courtyard. Senior brother, don't go the wrong way." Gu Lingyao was currently ranked 128th in the Tianfeng Xingzong Core Disciple rankings. This ranking could be said to be at the bottom. However, she was a new core disciple, so this was normal. Nodding, the two immediately parted ways. Xiao Chen returned to his residence first. He would look for Gu Lingyao later. He didn't realize that he had been tricked by Wang Fong. Of course, this was also because Wang Fong didn't have any enmity towards him. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't take any precautions. Xiao Chen left. At the same time, on the Battlegate Pavilion's first battle stage, Bai Zhong was also slowly walking down the stage with the help of his henchmen. His face was extremely gloomy. He didn't say a word until he left the Battlegate Pavilion and returned to his residence. Then, Bai Zhong said fiercely, "Xiao Chen, just you wait. I, Bai Zhong, will definitely not let this go. If I don't kill you, I swear that I'm not human." Bai Zhong's character naturally couldn't accept today's battle. Therefore, he swore to take revenge on Xiao Chen. Hearing this, a core disciple cautiously said, "But senior brother Bai Zhong, Xiao Chen's strength isn't ordinary. If we rashly deal with him, I'm afraid it's not wise." Xiao Chen's strength had completely intimidated these people. Hearing this, Bai Zhong's face sank. He immediately slapped this person and said with a ferocious expression, "You mean you want me to swallow this anger? Senior brother Bai Zhong, please calm down. I don't dare." The disciple respectfully replied, If we want to deal with Xiao Chen, we don't have to do it ourselves. Moreover, this time, I won't just casually teach him a lesson. I want his life. Go and contact the White Bone Gang. Tell them that I, Bai Zhong, have something to discuss with them." Bai Zhong ignored this disciple and said coldly, "Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 591. Hearing Bai Zhong mention the White Bone Gang, the expressions of the surrounding disciples changed slightly. They all knew about the White Bone Gang. The White Bone Gang was an evil gang that occupied several big cities around Tianfeng Xingzong. Although it wasn't very strong in Tianfeng Prefecture, it was said that their leader was a Dao Transformation Realm warrior. This kind of strength was enough to deal with Xiao Chen. Moreover, the White Bone Gang had always been known for their cruel means. They would do anything to achieve their goals. In the past, the Heavenly Wind Saints sect had also taken action to wipe out the White Bone Gang. Unfortunately, the leader of the White Bone Gang was extremely cunning. As soon as he heard the news, he immediately went into hiding. Moreover, the White Bone Gang had never dared to make a move against the people of the Heavenly Wind Saints sect. In fact, the leader of the White Bone Gang even had the intention to rope in some attendants and disciples of the Heavenly Wind Saints sect. With the help of these people, the White Bone Gang was doing very well. As the first core disciple, Bai Zhong naturally had connections with the White Bone Gang. He had even helped the White Bone Gang in the past. Now that Bai Zhong wanted to find the White Bone Gang, his purpose was self-evident. He wanted to use the White Bone Gang to kill Xiao Chen. Several disciples looked at each other. They all felt that Bai Zhong was really too ruthless this time. He didn't hesitate to use the power of the White Bone Gang to get rid of Xiao Chen. It should be known that once this matter was exposed, not only would the White Bone Gang be finished, but Bai Zhong would also not have a good ending. The Sage sect would never sit by and watch such a crime of plotting to kill the first core disciple. At the same time, if anything happened to Xiao Chen, the Sage sect would definitely investigate to the end. They all felt a little worried. Bai Zhong also saw through their thoughts. He smiled coldly and said, "You guys can rest assured. I naturally know that if something happens to Xiao Chen, the Sage sect will definitely investigate to the end. However, I can assure you that no one will be able to find out about this matter. Moreover, I won't do it now. After a while, when the wind blows over, I will find an opportunity to kill that kid secretly." Hearing Bai Zhong's words, the disciples secretly breathed a sigh of relief. However, even if they were worried, they couldn't change anything. They and Bai Zhong had long been in the same boat. Bai Zhong was planning to take revenge on Xiao Chen. This time, he directly wanted Xiao Chen's life. Xiao Chen didn't know about this. He had already returned to his residence. Xiao Chen was drinking Phoenix chicken soup. Logically speaking, at Xiao Chen's level, he should have been able to abstain from eating for a long time. However, it was human nature to crave for good food. Furthermore, the phoenix pheasant was no ordinary pheasant. It had a trace of the blood of the phoenix in its body. Long-term consumption of the pheasant was extremely beneficial to the body of a warrior. It could nourish the meridians and heal internal injuries. As such, Xiao Chen would eat a pheasant almost every few days. Of course, there were many warriors like Xiao Chen. After all, phoenix chicken. It was good to eat it. It tasted delicious. Why not eat it? But there was a problem. The price of phoenix chicken. Ordinary warriors couldn't afford it. Xiao Chen drank 3 big bowls of soup in a row. At the same time, the 4 maids who were in charge of serving Xiao Chen also held a bowl of soup and sipped it. Compared to Xiao Chen, the 4 maids' table manners were obviously much more elegant. Ah! This phoenix chicken is really a rare delicacy. Not only is it delicious, but it can also nourish the meridians and heal internal injuries. It's a good thing. It's a pity that it's too expensive. Otherwise, I can have one every day. Xiao Chen sighed as he put down his bowl and chopstick. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the 4 maids smiled but didn't say anything. Towards Xiao Chen, the 4 maids were full of gratitude. Phoenix chicken was a good thing. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't share it with maids. But Xiao Chen was different. Not to mention the phoenix chicken, Xiao Chen would even share with the 4 maids all kinds of heaven and earth spirit fruits given by Glory Sect. This made the 4 maids extremely grateful to Xiao Chen. Patting his stomach, Xiao Chen stood up and returned to his room. He still had to go to Gu Lingyao's place later. Xiao Chen wanted to rest for a while. He rested in his room until dusk. Only then did Xiao Chen make his way to Gu Lingyao's place unhurriedly. Gu Lingyao's place was located halfway up the mountain. It didn't take long for Xiao Chen to arrive at Gu Lingyao's room. He knocked lightly on the door. However, the one who opened the door wasn't Gu Lingyao, but Wang Fong. Seeing that it was Xiao Chen, Wang Fong revealed a smile on her face. "Senior brother Xiao Chen, I thought you weren't coming." "Why would I? Lingyao invited me for a drink. Naturally, I have to come." Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled and replied. Under Wang Fong's lead, Xiao Chen entered Gu Lingyao's small courtyard. Compared to his own residence, Gu Lingyao's courtyard was clearly inferior. However, that was only relative. At the very least, there wasn't a courtyard like this in the Tianqi sect. From this, one could see the foundation of Tianfeng Xingzong. Even the core disciples ranked at the bottom were treated much better than the other sects in the Tianfeng prefecture. Perhaps it was because of this that so many people wanted to enter Tianfeng Xingzong. Walking all the way to the backyard, Xiao Chen saw Gu Lingyao, who was wearing a short green skirt. It was obvious that she had specially dressed up. The current Gu Lingyao was indeed indescribably beautiful. Her innate quickness was like the arrival of spring. It made one's mood involuntarily improve. "Xiao Chen." Seeing Xiao Chen walk over, Gu Lingyao shouted with a red face. This time, Gu Lingyao didn't take the initiative to run away. Instead, she took the initiative to greet Xiao Chen. In response, Xiao Chen smiled and nodded. The wine and dishes had already been prepared. What Xiao Chen didn't expect was that Gu Lingyao and Wang Fong had also stewed a phoenix chicken. Thinking about how he had just eaten a phoenix chicken and now there was another one, Xiao Chen smiled helplessly. This expensive phoenix chicken seemed to be nothing to him. But it was a little strange. With Gu Lingyao and Wang Fong's status, it wouldn't be easy for them to get a phoenix chicken in Tianfeng Xingzong. One had to know that there weren't many phoenix chickens in the entire Tianfeng Xingzong. Even Xiao Chen couldn't eat a phoenix chicken every day, let alone Wang Fong and Gu Lingyao. Of course, Xiao Chen didn't know that this phoenix chicken wasn't given to him by Glory Sect, but by Wang Fong. The 2 girls' identities weren't simple. Gu Lingyao was the little princess of the Tianqi sect. At the same time, her father, Gu Lingyao, was a hidden saint. A phoenix chicken shouldn't be much to Gu Lingyao. As for Wang Fong, she was a little mysterious. Even Gu Lingyao didn't know about her background. Please add vote recommend. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.